Welcome to the Carlisle Select Board meeting for June 10th, 2025. I'm taking over in order to reorganize the board, so I would entertain a motion for a new chair.
I'd like to make a motion, please. I'd move that we nominate and elect Scott Triola for chair of the select board.
I second that.
I'll second that.
Do we have to nominate first and then second? Then elect, or it's all one thing?
So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Right.
It's just the chair we do.
No, but are we
He's saying to
nominating
nominate
or are we electing? Is it a two-step thing or a one-step thing?
One-
Are there any more nominations? Seeing none? Seeing none? Any deliberation? No deliberation. We'll take a vote.
Voice vote.
Voice vote's fine.
Aye.
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 All in favor?
All in favor.
All in favor, sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have a new chair.
Hey,
Congratulations.
Hey, okay. So
Yeah.
who are the other people?
that's up to him now. He can.
Right.
With whom?
You're gonna switch seats, you're gonna run it from there. You good?
Oh, yeah, I can run here. So why don't we move on to appoint the other positions, and then we'll do the customary review of the agenda and get underway. So for the position of vice chair, do we have a nomination?
I move we nominate Barney Arnold as vice chair.
Second.
You accept?
Oh, I thought I was waiting to see if there were any other nominations. No. All right. Yes, I will accept. If elected, I will serve.
One more year. Is there any discussion or deliberation? We'll do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations, Barney. Next, we'll move to appoint the position of clerk. Christine, do you have any interest in being clerk?
Sure.
I was clerk last year. It's
The freshman gets to be
the
clerk.
freshman gets to
Usually
be
that's the normal assignment.
You have to
freshman
bring
year.
cookies.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
great. Can we have a motion?
Go ahead.
I move that Christine Stevens be nominated and elected clerk of the
Position of clerk.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any deliberations? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Congratulations. And then finally, move to authorize to sign town warrants. Last year, that was Barney and myself.
How many do we need?
Well, there's two spots, correct?
In
Yeah,
addition,
put it in.
Ryan always.
Only one has to sign, but you have to have an
Right.
alternate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm happy to continue because I live
Yeah.
down the street and it's fairly easy, but if you want to be the primary and I'm the secondary.
You could, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I'm willing to do it. So do we just nominate both? Can we have a nomination for
Sure.
signing of the warrants?
I nominate Barney and Travis to be signers of the, sorry. Let me slip. I nominate Barney and
Whoa.
Scott Triola to be signers of the warrant.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Any discussion? Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. So with that, we can move on to the next agenda item. So let me just briefly recap what the agenda will be tonight. We're going to start as per normal with community input. Then we're going to do appoints and resignations. We have a petition for location for conduits and manholes at 7:25. That's a hearing. Then at 7:35, we have a town meeting review discussion with moderator Wayne Davis, followed by a joint meeting with the Agricultural Commission, Conservation Commission, and Land Stewardship Committee to discuss management and use of town lands. And I will note at that session, we will have opportunity for community input. At 9:00, initial personnel policies update. 9:30, means tested senior citizen property tax exemption vote. 9:35, we're going to schedule some summer select board meetings. 9:45, the TA report. 9:55, warrants and minutes, liaison reports. And as time allows, we will end with community input. So with that, I'm going to open it up to community input. First, I'll start with the folks here in the room. Does anyone have any community input? No, seeing none. Online, I see John up there. If you could just state your name and address and keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes if possible. Thank you.
Right. John Ballantyne, 268 Fifth Street. And I wanted to share my screen and 2 graphs, which Ryan's let me do. And I'm sharing it. And so essentially, first of all, I know your agenda is very full, and that we're all quite busy thinking about the November town meeting and the MBTA Act. And so I just wanted to make a comment on what I've shown here and the work that I've done over the past 25 years is looking at the Carlisle demographics with Verna Gilbert and the changes that are going to be happening in town looking forward 10 to 15 years. And you can see that we've grown from a town of 3,000 to 5,400. And then the question is, how are we going to grow over the next 10 to 15 years? And that's very much dependent on new housing, new construction, which obviously the MBTA Act and the overlay zones is very much going to impact that. So that's something we should continue to look at. And what I'm suggesting that's important as we look at the next part, which is, of course, what happens with overall taxes, facilities, capital expenditures, and everything else. And this is something that I did when I was working on the master plan, and obviously, when I've been in the finance committee, I'm quite aware of all the issues of the budgets and figuring that out. And you've worked very hard to come up with a 5-year capital plan. What I'm suggesting is that we begin to kind of go back and look out longer term over the next 10 to 15 years and try to sort of in a schematic scenario way, say, how is the growth going to impact and how is that going to affect what our taxes are there? What I have here is, of course, we're at about $17,000 in taxes on the average. On a real basis, that's remained relatively flat, and we've worked very hard to keep it at that level at 3% per year, as you know, went up a little bit more. So my suggestion is, as we're looking at the November town meeting and figuring out what the impact is of the MBTA Act and the growth in new housing, not just the possibility of MBTA, but overall, because we know that from the master plan, we have about 300 possible lots. How do we juggle that all so that we can get our arms around this and the planning board and you all can focus not only on sort of the financial implications, but what are we going to do in terms of zoning and everything else? And so my suggestion is that we try to get a small committee, not to kind of dive into the details of what you all do in the budget, but just sort of say what it's going to look like, what's the town going, what is it, how quickly is the town going to grow, what is the build out, and then how does that affect everything? So that's my thought and comments. And again, I'm willing, along with other people, to help in this effort. We've obviously got models and a lot of people who are familiar with it. So thank you very much and good luck with everything that you guys are trying to do. And, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm sure your summer is not going to be quiet. And I really appreciate everything, what's going on. And so,
Hey, John, can you send us those charts?
I've already sent them to Ryan, but I'll send them. Absolutely. I've made a couple little changes, but yes.
Okay.
Okay, and so we can have them, be sure they're added to the minutes. Yeah,
Yep, we have a copy of those.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
All right, John.
Do we
Okay,
have-
thanks. Good luck with everything. I hope you get home. It's
See you in November.
time for bed and welcome to the select board. It's a lot of fun.
Much more for then.
Do we have any other community comments remotely? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next agenda item. That is appointments and resignations. Oh, and let me say at the outset, I forgot to welcome our newest select board member, Christine Stevens.
Right.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
And also to congratulate and welcome our returning Barney Arnold and Travis Snell. So thank you very much for running again. And thank you to all the candidates who ran this year and are willing to volunteer their time in support of Carlisle. As we segue into appointments and resignations, you'll see very clearly that the elected positions in this town are a very small portion of the work that needs to get done. And if you weren't elected or you're thinking about joining a group or contributing to Carlisle, pay attention to this next section because there's lots of appointments and there's lots of open spots and lots of opportunities to get involved and contribute. So with that, let's move on to appointments and resignations, but mostly appointments. We have the slide deck, I think, Ryan, that you sent around, I think would be helpful. If maybe we go through the appointment and committee actions in the order that you had them, starting with so we have it in your packet. There's a long list of committees with various appointments. One recommendation this year was that we discuss certain committees where there are some questions to be answered and then potentially approve them all as a whole slate. Or if there are particular committees where there's an outstanding question, we can remove those to deliberate later.
I love it. A consent agenda.
It is a consent agenda. Where's Wayne? And we can approve the majority of them. So Ryan had flagged some initial points of discussion that was on slide 2, starting with the cemetery task force had a request to change from a task force, which was designed specifically for the town meeting purpose to secure funding and do some initial work on the cemetery.
Right.
They're looking to make that into a more ongoing committee. So in your packet, there is a revised description of the cemetery committee, along with the appointments for that committee. I reviewed it. I was the liaison to the cemetery task force. I believe Ryan has looked at this. This is something I support, and I support the language, and I certainly support the continued involvement of Gordon, Susan, and Dana Booth.
Is this in the packet under the C? Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, it's under cemetery task force.
Okay.
The cemetery committee.
Yeah.
So I saw the word commission somewhere, but we're calling it a committee. Is that right?
Yes, commission is a statutory name that they wanted to avoid.
Okay, that's fine. I just saw commission and something in here. That's good to know.
It's
Okay,
somewhere between a task force and a commission, a committee.
great.
So if people are supportive, what we can do is we can move to accept the committee charter. And then we can just do the committee participants as part of the slate if we want to
Yeah.
go that approach.
Sure.
I have one other just quick comment here. Because I know in the past with new committees, we've sometimes recommended that a member of the ESC be part of the committee. Now, I don't know if that's relevant to the cemetery committee. I mean, it's obviously an open public space, and this committee is charged with kind of preserving, the historic character, et cetera. Is that something that the ESC would want to be? It doesn't have to be as a voting member. I mean, you could just have a liaison. Yeah. And
There's 2 vacancies on the committee, so
Oh.
If anyone wants to get involved, certainly that would be welcome. But
Okay.
I'm not sure if the work overlaps that directly.
That much?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does someone want to make a motion as to accepting
The charter?
committee charter as presented?
Sure. I move to accept the committee charter as presented.
Second,
Seconds.
any discussion?
Discussion. So is there a thing, Ryan, is there a procedural thing that we have to do other than vote it to make a committee out of a task force?
It's your committee, so they're just advising you on all things cemetery.
Okay.
And what we're saying in this is that the task force is going to, or do they feel they've already submitted a final report? No.
The task force believes their work is complete, so they're done.
Okay, all right.
And they'd
Great.
like to now transition to a committee to oversee the implementation of the task force findings.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
We'll take a vote, voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's been passed. The next, we had 2 committees where there were 3 applicants for 2 seats. The first was the Conservation Restriction Advisory Committee. There's information in the packet regarding that situation. The slate as recommended is listed under the FY26 slate, so we can discuss or,
Oh, I see. This is under the things that we need to,
Yeah.
the items that you had highlighted that we need to address.
So,
Gotcha.
Mr. Chair, can I make or ask you a procedural or a question? When you have the slate, does that mean that's what the committee itself recommends? And does that imply that that committee has, in the case where there's more applicants than spaces, they've done some vetting already?
Yes, in these two instances, yes.
Okay, so in other words, I don't know who's not on the list, but whoever didn't make the cut, they did interview but decided not to. They prefer somebody else.
I'm not sure if there was interviews done or what process, but they did make a recommendation.
And the reps are these statutory in this particular case that these particular people need to be? There's a representative seat for these 3 or 4 committees.
Trails, planning and conservation
Right, that's a mandatory thing.
and CCF, I
I'm
guess.
sorry, it's not mandatory statutorily. It's mandatory because when you created the charter.
Right,
that's
for the charter.
Yep.
So automatically, whenever those committees or boards are going to have to nominate somebody to fill that spot.
correct, like you are tonight after you do this.
And the additional applicant, per the note from Gretchen, that has to wait until that person is no longer in a paid position with the town, correct?
So we believe that as an employee, that applicant should wait or review with ethics whether or not there's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But if
Will be
there's
very
already a
soon.
full slate if there's already a full slate, then does that mean that would be something for the next time there's an opening?
Correct, yep. These are public documents. So Sylvia Willard would like to serve on the crack commission, but right now she's being paid. So we're recommending that she wait until she's not.
So some future, we don't hold this open for that.
No.
Right, okay, great.
And then will it be up to the Trails Committee and the Planning Board and the Conscom to recruit someone from their board or committee to also sit on this?
Yes.
While we're talking, can I ask a question? So I noticed in all of these motions that there's a move to appoint and then it's presented or amended pursuant to confirmation of residence.
Right.
Clerk does that.
If applicable. So not every appointment requires residency
And how is that determined?
by the charter and or the state law that applies to that particular committee or board. So if it is a requirement, we vet it. If it's not, we don't.
Which ones are not? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
Huh.
You'd be surprised.
Mostly they need to be residents.
I'm just suggesting this as a point that maybe the select board should take that up in the future, because I think that having residents serve on committees makes a lot of sense. If they're not non-residents, I just don't think that's
What's the
appropriate.
point?
Yeah. So maybe that'll be something.
I would say it the other way. I'd say we have a dearth of residents who want to do things, and so if somebody outside has an interest and there's not a statutory reason to not have them.
Well, let's find out first of all, what,
Which
are there
committees?
any,
Yeah.
or which
I don't
ones?
think it's very many.
No,
I'd be surprised if it's.
I would too. But we have had the question come up about some members that may not have residence here in town and whether they're allowed to participate and vote on a committee. So it'd be good to clarify that.
I would say that most of your boards and committees that aren't statutory do not have any residency restrictions.
And unless we place them on them,
Correct.
right,
And you only have authority over your boards and committees.
right.
I mean, that's a bigger question we can take up as
Yeah.
a select board, looking at the committees. I think for now, for these appointments, probably keep the path unless
Yeah.
people want to wait and discuss the residency requirements.
No,
Okay.
no, but I
Yep.
think it's worth.
No, it is. And I know it was on there as a bullet point in the agenda item, and I didn't see anything in the packet, and I wasn't reading as carefully as you.
Yeah.
Travis, that that was what that was referring to. With regard to FinCom, there's a note in there around FinCom's recommendation. The FinCom feels the incumbent should continue. There was another individual who was interested, and I think he's also recommended to be appointed on other committees. So FinCom's recommendation is as appears under the slate. Okay. We still have the outstanding question of MFC. There's an open seat that Travis, I know you had been filling from a select board standpoint. So there's a question on the MFC. Do we want to continue to have a select board representative on the MFC? Do you want to continue to serve on the MFC?
My opinion is I think it's important to have a select board member. I think the MFC has a fairly substantial budget and, you know, having direct involvement is important by the select board. But if someone else would like to take that responsibility, I'd be happy to.
You have lots of time now. What are you talking about?
Is there anyone else that would be interested in serving on the MFC?
I was going to suggest, though, there's some other committees. Maybe we can talk about those all in conjunction, just so we can,
There's the,
rather than do it piecemeal.
so we also have select board representatives on the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust, the Community Preservation Committee, CPC, and the Safety Committee. So those are all committees where we appoint a member from the select board. So if you look at those four committees, MFC, Affordable Housing Trust, CPC, Safety Committee, do any of the members have any particular interest?
You should probably each take one.
Barney,
I would like to continue on the CPC
okay.
if it's possible.
Is there any objection to that?
No.
No. So we would just amend the slate, right, to include Barney versus take a vote on this particular.
Yeah, it's in here later. You have to nominate me, I think, right? And then I have to be approved.
Sorry, yeah, you should vote to nominate your people onto your committee and then the slate will be whole, assuming you agree with all of the current.
Okay, so we vote Barney onto the slate and then we vote the slate.
The whole slate.
Okay.
Trying to make this easier. A little.
There's no easy way.
So we could nominate all. I suggest that
Yeah,
there's 4 spots. We should
We
each
should
take one.
figure it out.
And then we should just do a vote
Right.
and get us all on there, right?
So Affordable Housing Trust? Anybody interested in?
Christine should pick from the remaining. Are
Yeah.
you gonna stay in MFC?
You know what? I'll stay on MFC.
All right, so.
Okay.
Stay on MFC.
Christine, you can pick and I'll take the one you don't want, I guess.
Unless you want to be on the MFC, Christine.
Yeah, that's a big time commitment. I mean, I know a small fraction from the library, but the rest of it is.
Running quickly.
Yes, you.
So you're saying between Affordable Housing Trust and Safety Committee?
Yeah.
I would do Safety Committee.
I'll take the shirt.
Right, so we're looking for a motion to put those respective individuals on those respective committees, correct?
Yes.
The slate. So does someone want to make that motion?
Sure.
Yeah.
I move that we, are we appointing or electing?
Really?
We're
We don't know.
appointing.
Pointing, yeah.
I move we appoint Travis Snell to the to represent the select board on the MFC, David Modell to represent the select board on the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust, Barney Arnold to represent the select board on the CPC, and Christine Stevens to represent the select board on the Safety Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? No. Take a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, motion passes. So I think with that, we could, if no one objects, we could either quickly
Yeah.
tick through these as a hold, if anyone wants to discuss any, or we could vote the whole slate.
Great.
You want
Let's do it.
What do you want to do?
One more question. The ESC has a seat on the safety committee per your charter. Do you want that to continue?
Why wouldn't we?
It was just a test run for a year, so just confirming you want it still.
Was that,
It connects with connectivity.
so you support it?
Right.
If the ESC supports it, yes.
Right.
We don't need to vote that though, because that's,
Sorry, he's a co-chair, I'm not.
You wanna-
Oh, sorry. Eric, do you have a comment on that?
I support it as well, and I think it's from an active transportation perspective as well.
Eric, it's hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry, is this any better?
Okay.
The ASC supports it for a couple of reasons. Active transportation is one of them.
Okay. Great.
All right, great. All right,
So do we want to move the whole slate
sure.
Wait, for everything?
for everything?
Yeah.
Well, I had one, that I wanted to hold off on the, Conservation Commission. Where is it? Where is it?
It's on 42,
See
page
it.
42 of
Yeah.
the packet.
It's coming, page 42. Oh, this doesn't have numbers on it.
No, on, oh, here.
Yeah, I did it differently. Hold on. I just have to, okay, here it is. I noted that, where am I? Where was it? Conscom. Oh, I'm on crack, not the, sorry. Knew that wasn't safe.
Not a great sentence.
I noted that, Helen Young said she would continue serving unless there was someone else that wanted to, and I don't know whether the Conscom, did any outreach, but Helen said she'd be happy to retire. And so, I think it might be worth, unless someone on this board has had a conversation with those folks, to see if there's another volunteer that might want to get involved and would be interested in being part of the slate.
But then you have to do a whole nother thing, right? Nobody's stepped up yet, right?
No, we just separate it out and do it.
Pull it out, prove everything else, and then return
Go
to this
the
one.
next time.
So you're saying leave the window open? in other
Yeah,
words.
yeah, and
Do you have
see-
any reason to believe somebody else is gonna step up?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I would not do that just because they can't meet if you don't.
Yeah. Can we remove her and keep that seat vacant?
She could resign and then you could
She could
appoint it
resign.
again.
Why don't we just apply? I think we should first.
So you mean wait until there was somebody else that wanted to serve and then she would resign, or have her resign now and then it's an
We
open
can resign whenever she.
seat?
I would, just because if they can't get a quorum, then the conscom comes to a halt. So
And are they meeting more than once a month? Because didn't they meet last week?
they meet twice a month. They meet twice a month.
Gotcha. Okay, so what is your recommendation? Just leave it as is?
Yeah, that switch can happen at any time.
Uh-huh.
So I wouldn't hold up the conscom slate. Maybe that one seat, or just wait until there's someone that can fill. And then
Mhm. It's sort of, well, that's fine. If it's full, then it's less likely somebody's gonna wanna step forward. But
I see that.
that's fine. And I'll talk, privately about.
So does someone want to move the slate? Because I do want to get to the public hearing,
Yeah,
7:25 scheduled.
Can move the slate as written.
Second, the slate as written.
As written or as amended?
It's written and amended.
As written and amended.
It's
Okay.
written and amended.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. And with that, we need to open our 7:25 petition for location for conduits and manholes. So can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
second.
Don't need to read the thing, do we?
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Great. So we officially open the petition for location conduits and manholes on Carlton Road. Is there anyone from NSTAR,
Eversource.
Eversource?
Yes, Jackie Duffy, Eversource.
Great.
How are you tonight?
Very good. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. We would like to install approximately 6 feet of conduit on Carlton Road, and this is necessary to provide electric service to 38 Carlton Road.
What are they doing for electricity now?
Right now, it's overhead.
Oh, okay.
They're putting a pad mount in there also.
Okay.
They're putting a what?
A pad mount transformer?
Got it.
Whose land is it on that they're building on? On their own land?
Oh, there was a plot on there. It's under construction, isn't it, Jackie?
Yes, it is under construction. So right now there's a temp upright. That's how they're getting service, just to build it.
And is this necessary to provide utility service?
Yes,
And who's paying for it?
they are.
The homeowner, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And did we authorize or anyone to supervise or inspect any work?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm just filling in. I could go back to the division.
Oh, I'm
and
looking
ask
at my
them.
fellow board members.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Without proper permitting, so
I see.
it wouldn't be allowed if it was not allowable.
Okay.
And it looks like it's adjacent to the road.
Yeah.
I know there's a little diagram, and it shows it below the street surface, but it looks like this is kind of to the side, so you don't have to necessarily dig up the road in this case.
No,
Is that the homeowner's land right up to the edge of the road? Whose land is that little slice?
Which slice?
Is that the
It's
38?
occupying a little slice between something called approximate ROW and then the edge of the road.
Okay, so that's the right of way. So that's why we're giving the easement.
Yeah.
So it's the homeowner's land, but it's a right of way.
Yeah, we have to give an easement from our road to their guy.
And we haven't heard from any abutters with any concerns or complaints.
One of butter moved to France. That was her.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
We will assume it was not in direct opposition.
We would have heard from Kate if there was a problem.
Okay.
And you said you don't expect to have to do anything with the actual roadway there?
no.
Because we've generally had a clause that says if there is any, if it affects the town's roadway at all, then the Eversource would agree to return that to its current condition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you notify the neighborhood?
I'm not sure how Carlisle does it, but usually we get an abutters list, and every town's different. I'm not sure if the town sends it out or we send it out. The towns I represent, some of them we send out, and other ones the town sends it out. So there were 5 abutters notified.
Okay.
38 Carlton, 51 Carlton, 54 Carlton, and 217 East Riding Drive.
We've reached the limit of my knowledge on this, so.
Pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Does someone want to make a motion? As,
I think we want to.
oh yeah, we gotta close.
Allow for
Sorry.
any-
You have to allow us to comment.
Thank you. Is there no one from the public that wants to comment? Either in person or online? Seeing none, I guess we would close the public hearing and then take the vote.
I move that we close the public hearing for the location of the conduit and manhole petition.
Second.
All in favor, or any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and now we can move to a vote. Or I'm sorry, a motion.
To approve the petition and plan submitted by Enstar Electric Company doing business as Eversource Energy for the purpose of obtaining a joint or identical pole location to construct and a location for such a line of conduits and manholes with the necessary wires and cables therein. Said conduits and manholes to be located under the following public way or ways of said town: Carlton Road, northerly from proposed splice box, approximately 430 feet west of East Riding Drive. Install approximately 6 feet of conduit.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We
All
are.
right, 7:35 on the dot, and it's time for.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, you want to go back and do Constable Topo?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you.
No problem.
We are discussing, let's see, this is,
And he was asking, if I read this correctly, Well, we've normally done a 1-year appointment. He was asking for a 3-year, I believe. Am I reading
Right,
that
there are two
correctly?
options
Tell
for,
us about that.
So I met with Mr. Topol. He is, for all intents and purposes, a professional constable doing service across the Commonwealth, really, but mostly in Middlesex County, just for the stability of his job, and he does do a good job for the town. He would just request a 3-year appointment rather than having to come each year for an appointment. In terms of staff, we don't have any issues to report with Mr. Topol.
and is that standard or common that you would have a 3-year term?
It is fairly common. Yeah, you can do 1 or 3. Some towns have trouble getting constables, so it's good to lock one in when you got one.
So when does
I'm
the,
comfortable with 3. I mean, he's been doing this for us for quite a
Yeah,
while.
that's fine.
And he's done a fine job.
yeah, just for my own benefit, I would benefit from an education on what he does and what the division of labor is with the police. Does he deliver official papers? Is that what I understand? So sometimes I read in the Mosquito that the police have assisted in delivering, a subpoena or something. When does the constable deliver and when does the police deliver? Does any?
This is what I know of it. The constable delivers certain statutory documents. One of the most famous is the town meeting warrant. So that has to be delivered by a constable. There are certain documents that the constable has to do. The rest of them are or can really be delivered by anybody, but we normally seek, or the courts normally seek, people who know how to do it professionally. So that's not statutory, not what we would use this for, but that is what constables are used for. So the ones you're seeing in the paper are probably civil disputes, not municipal disputes.
Right. Is this a paid position?
When he does it for us, it's paid. Yes.
Oh, it's paid, like paid by the drink kind of thing. Got it. Okay.
So do we want to do a motion for 1 year or 3 years? I would support 3 years.
Me too.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I move that we appoint Joseph Topol to the position of constable for the town of Carlisle with a term to begin July 1, 2025 and end June 30, 2028.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Wayne.
Yay.
So this is a town meeting review discussion with moderator Wayne Davis. I do want to point out that at our next meeting, we plan to have a joint meeting with the,
Yeah, I want to apologize because I was under the misunderstanding, I guess, from Travis.
That was my error.
We were gonna do everything at once, so I did invite the members of the town meeting study committee to show up. And some did, 2 are here, three actually. Wayne is here, Mark Bernstein and Don Drinkwater. Don, raise your hand. And I think Nancy's online, so. Like to,
I
but
apologize.
it's not a joint meeting, so we're not gonna deliberate. We are gonna meet again, as said, on the 24th.
it's the tentative agenda, yeah.
Yeah, and we've prepared some slides but we were gonna wait for that to do that, so. I apologize but I'm glad you guys are showing up and hello and. Go ahead.
It was my error on that. Just
No,
thinking we could.
we're all confused. It's okay. So I'm going to try not to overlap with what the town meeting study committee will talk about, but there will inevitably be some overlap. Let me just give a couple of quick things, and then I really benefit from hearing your feedback as well. It's an important piece of how I like to, try to keep improving. First, let me say just a huge thanks to the committee. It has been just such a huge benefit to me having other people, as I feel like I've been flying solo for 15 or 16 years, and now I have this kitchen cabinet, so to speak, who helps me think through issues. Thank to the select board for all the support that you've given to me and to the town meeting study committee over the last couple of years. And thanks to Ryan and Aubrey and Gretchen and our town clerk, Ashley. as well as Alana, just a fantastic town hall team that has really been just really knocked themselves out this year. So thanks to everyone. Couple quick highlights. All the stuff that was done in the pre-meeting run-up, changing the schedule and so forth, and the town meeting study committee will have a lot more to say about that. I think on the whole, the conclusion is it was all very successful. On the feedback that came from the boards and committees, the one consistent complaint, which is entirely legitimate, because this was the first time we were doing it, is our communication out to them about expectations and schedule and so forth was messy. Because we were inventing it as we were going along. We need to get a lot clearer about what's expected and when. I think, and that's really sort of a detail. It's not a policy issue for you or the committee. It's more just figuring out schedules and working with Ryan and the team here to figure it out. So, so there's room for improvement, but on the whole, I think the feedback is that worked pretty well. And most of the other boards and committees were happy with having put in the effort. They felt that the effort was worth it for the most part. There'll be a few exceptions that you'll hear about the next report. One mistake I made, and it was a little bit of confusion, and because it was Alana's first as clerk here, first annual town meeting, only having Ashley, only having 2 poll pads for check-in. We really should have had 3. So that was one mistake. And then a judgment call that I made that in 2020 hindsight, I wish I hadn't, was as soon as we hit 150 on the quorum, should have started the proceedings and not waited. That really, I didn't think we were going to go 6 hours. Had I known, I certainly would have thought differently, but that one won't happen again. And there'll have to be some special planning if we expect a really large turnout both this fall and at any future annual town meetings, how we get people in as quickly as possible. There seemed to be a lot of positive reaction to the expanded use of the consent agenda, and so the public reaction seemed to be, maybe put more things in, be even more aggressive. What I would say, and I really look forward to discussing this with the committee, I think we should do that, but there are some philosophical issues that we need to work through. I don't know how I come down on them. So, for example, we've operated under the rule that one person can ask for a hold. Some other towns require 7 or 15 people, say. So one person can ask for a hold, but then the moderator says, are there 6 other people who want a hold on this? There are reasons for and against both things. We need to talk those things through. And I think it becomes more important the more articles we put in the consent agenda. Another thing is how to handle projects you think everyone's going to support, so it's probably an easy yes, but you think that there may be important informational thing. So I think the poster child for that this time around was the cemetery, right? Of course, we were going to vote $25,000 for that software. It was really compelling. Does anyone know how the cemetery works? Has anyone ever known? Well, now a lot of the town knows. Is that important and valuable? A good use of time? Philosophical, value judgment. And then also handling CPA articles. I think we need to just do a little more processing and figure out, do we want to continue doing it the way we did it this time? Do we can adjust certain things there. So again, those are issues. I don't have a settled answer or recommendation on those, but those are things that I'm thinking about. One thing that I think we didn't fully think through, and I admit I didn't expect the meeting to go as long as it did, is we used to have a clear expectation around stop times on evening meetings. In general, we don't start a new article after 10 p.m. unless I ask the meeting and say, okay, look, we only have one more to go. Do you want to keep going? Or do we want to, wait till tomorrow night? And everyone always says, no, let's finish, right? We didn't think that through, and we didn't come up with a clear expectation. If we're going to continue with Sunday afternoon meetings, we need to decide what is that trigger stop time going to be. And if we're going to go into a second session, is that second session going to be Monday evening, or is it going to be the following weekend? Those, I think the committee will have to come with some recommendations on that, but I think that's going to be ultimately a select board decision to be made both this fall as well as for the future. So I think that one's actually going to be a big one. I heard a lot of feedback that goes both ways in terms of moving debate along. Some people want me to be more aggressive. I actually felt that most of the debate was not repetitive. I push people when I hear the same arguments being made over and over again. So there are certain things that I think I could do that would move things along, and I will try them. At the same time, there were a lot of people who actually thought that there was higher quality debate this year. And particularly the boards and committees felt like their effort to publicize things in advance was in effect rewarded by having either fewer questions or higher quality questions in advance and more informed debate, which is kind of what we want, not just to shorten debate, but to have high quality debate. So there's a little bit of a trade-off between efficiency and the quality of the deliberation. And some members of the public don't want us to rush things too much. So again, that'll be some important value decisions, value judgments to be made in the future. Town Meeting Study Committee will have a lot more to say next time. And so I'd love to hear your feedback. I would just make one request. My recommendation is we spend zero time tonight speculating and thinking about how we're going to run the fall town meeting. That's a special town meeting. It's going to be a fairly unique one for us, as it has been for just about every other town who's done the MBTA zoning thing. And what would be most valuable to me and to future annual town meetings is to hear your feedback on this annual town meeting, so we know how to make it better for next year and the years thereafter. Okay, I'm done.
So next week, or the next meeting, we'll have time to discuss some of this, but I think if people just have any quick initial comments they want to provide in the setting, that would be helpful, because we still have 10 or so minutes that we can discuss this. I think one comment I have, or question I have, thinking forward, not how to run fall town meeting, but going through the past town meeting, was the handling of amendments, and amendments to amendments can get confusing. And so it hasn't come up a lot in town meetings prior to this one. And I think I think they might be more likely going forward. So I just thinking through the process by which people can make an amendment and how we communicate the amendments. I thought the Board of Health was handled properly, because they submitted it in writing. We knew ahead of time. I think amendments to amendments got confusing for a lot of people. And thinking through how to manage that, I think, would be helpful.
Yes, and I think that's a good example of there are some things that are very common in other town meetings, right. And the Carlisle town meeting culture is very different from other towns. For example, it's very different from how they do things in Concord, and it just is the way it is. And I think, there's an easy fix. Aubrey and I we hadn't discussed in advance, particularly around where I think an amendment is simple enough that I'm not asking for it in writing. We should have been a lot clearer about, okay, we still need to get it up on the screen and make sure. Right. And that was a clear oversight. So lesson learned on that one. Amendments to amendments. It's a tricky one. I thought in my mind about do I want to rule this one out of order because it'll be too confusing? Unfortunately, my judgment in the moment, which I think was right, was that actually it was a valid amendment and I didn't have valid grounds for, if I had thought that it could be handled in a way where I might have said, gee, this is going to be really confusing to do an amendment to amendment. Can we hold on that? But since it directly affected the one that was ultimately to be voted on, I didn't at the time see a different way to handle it. But it was a very good lesson, and I'll think through that a little bit more and hopefully be better prepared next time.
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent idea, that frankly, I think any amendment should be put up on the screen,
Absolutely.
even if it seems very straightforward. And that also, I think we want, and ideally it would be written that says a no vote equals and a yes vote equals, so
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
whatever you might be saying from the podium, people can see up there before they're putting their finger on the clicker, what their no or yes is actually going to mean.
Yeah, and we'll have to figure out, is there a way of doing it in writing? I was criticized by a few people afterwards that my verbal attempt to do that actually confused more than it helped. Which I.
Right, I would say there's a global theme we'll cover a little bit more next time, that we're underutilizing our AV.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the screen there's a whole nother thing we want to eventually talk about maybe using PEG funds to upgrade the projector, get better quality. But there's a IT component you can do in real time. You can make a little quick PowerPoint thing and slap it on there. We way underutilize that screen.
Yeah.
And we're giving up an entire very important visual, metric. So
Yeah.
So just, I have a tag on for AV and I've already relayed my comments to Wayne. I was in the overflow room, which only had 14 people in it this time, but more important for fall meeting, we're probably going to have more overflow. We couldn't see anything and we couldn't hear anything. And there was a delay when we could hear and see. So, and then there was no way to verbalize. So if someone wanted to ask a question or raise a point, they had to go into the other big room. So we'll need to fix the AV all around, David.
Yeah, that one actually might take a little bit of money. Yeah, the school keeps telling me that they actually don't have like a large screen on a card that can be rolled in.
Oh, there might be one from the library coming available.
Well, okay, and then there's the thought of PEG access funds as well. So we're going to be looking in that, and Ryan, just heads up, there may be some discussion headed your way.
Two other quick things I wanted to add, if that's okay. I think it'd be good to include breaks. So you're asking people to sit, for, in this case, it was 6.5 hours, but even after 2 hours, I think allowing for a stretch break, even if you're worried about losing some folks, I think it's really important to let some people get up, go to the bathroom, go get water, stretch their legs. And I had a couple of people mention that to me when I was campaigning at the transfer station. The other one is a bigger question for me, and that is, when something comes up, and in this case, it was the citizens petition, and separate from the issue of people not being able to stay focused on just the language of the advisory, right, but wanting to get into the details. I think the larger question for me was, how do you handle the statement about things that a fair number of people don't believe is accurate, right? So how do you, and there, there sort of wasn't an opportunity, there wasn't a sort of opportunity for, in this case, the planning board to say, well, here's our comment about this, or here's what we did, or here's what the law actually said, and so I think that's a challenge. And I know we're not supposed to talk about the fall, but I think that in fact could be something that will come up again in the fall. So I think we need to think about that when we have select board approved warrants, on a town meeting agenda.
Yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant to make a prediction because as soon as I make it, it means that the exact opposite thing will
You
happen.
could just take it as
But-
input to.
But yeah, I'll take it as input. I mean,
Yeah.
my sense is that this particular one, it was I won't call it unique, but a pretty rare, just in the way that it came up, which was, I had to try to limit the scope because I didn't want to talk about what's not in front of us and what will be in front of us in November. And I knew it would be a difficult line to draw. I think the general lesson is there will be other issues where it drawing the scope line is one of the hardest. It's a judgment call. And I've got to think those through as
I'm not sure I
possible.
understand your comment.
But essentially what happened in this one was that I made very clear that we were not going to debate the merits of any of the particular proposals.
Right. That part
It's
was
just the question is, do you want to tell the planning board that it's your opinion that they should bring more than one proposal to the fall town meeting?
that part was clear. I'm not.
That was clear. Well,
what
what the
happened was,
complaint was.
It's very hard to limit
They didn't
people
follow
to
the
that.
rules.
They didn't follow it. And so
Well-
things were stated that some other people might want
So
the
what-
opportunity to say, well, that is not in fact, whatever, that's not the case. And that, so that's why.
Yeah, so it's very difficult.
That's the model.
But
Yeah.
I do have, the fortunate thing about having this delayed so far is that I've already had 5 months to think about and study how to try to run that debate and also the experience from other towns.
Yeah.
So I've got a bunch, and part of the reason I didn't want to spend a lot of time here is because there are a bunch of things that I plan to talk about, and I've already told both the planning board as well as the citizens group that we will be sitting down in the fall and figuring out sort of ground rules for how we can have a fair and efficient debate. But it's really premature to get into that because it's going to depend very greatly on how many proposals the planning board actually chooses to.
Yeah. The other thing I'll just say in reflecting about us as a select board is that which we acknowledged that, we weren't really clear on how to handle a citizen's petition. And so there was some, confusion about the language that finally went into the warrant article. And so that's something that the select board needs to have a clearer process and understanding about how citizens petitions are handled by us.
Yeah. Another sort of piece of feedback that I would have for you as a board, and I will also say the same thing to the planning board, is you don't have to sit back and listen to everything. There's plenty of opportunity, if there's something you really care about, if there's an official position of the board and an official spokesman, then you can weigh in representing the board as well. At any time you do have, not that I'm encouraging you to be jumping all the time, but if you have an opinion as a citizen, and I mean, say something comes up and the vote to support or oppose on this board was 3-2. Well, if you were on the 2 side, there's nothing stopping you from getting down, going to the microphone on the floor and saying, okay, this is Scott Triola speaking for myself, not as a member of the select board. I think this is crazy, whatever you want to say, right?
Yeah.
And for the most part, things haven't evolved that way in past Carlisle town meetings, but it's certainly possible for the future. You know, honestly, I was on the whole amendment on the, you know, the Board of Health thing. Frankly, I was surprised how quiet you all were.
Yeah, so I wanna,
So I just,
you're bringing up two different.
I do want
Yeah.
to bring this discussion to a close though, because we do have a lot of people
But
here.
I think-
We're talking next week, so.
Yeah, so-
We'll forget it by then.
yeah, so I'm just, my point is that there are options that you
Right,
have.
but you're,
board.
I just wanna say, you're proposing two very different things. I think the select board should take on a more vocal advocacy position of things we're strongly advocacy for. And I agree with Wayne. We tend to be very reticent to weigh in on issues, but we had a lot of debate ourselves. And we should not in future be afraid to appoint somebody to articulate the select board. So on the second of your 2 points, I completely agree. I absolutely disagree that we should encourage divisiveness inside the board. I don't think that accomplishes anything. When we decide as a board, 3-2, 4-1, it doesn't matter. We're a board. I really don't think it's a great look for people to then go rogue on that. I don't like that. So that's my.
Yeah, I certainly am not I actually agree with you. I wasn't encouraging it. I was just trying to be fair in laying out there are those options.
I think that'll be something that we'll certainly be looking at going into the next town meeting.
Yeah.
But let's bring this discussion to a close. We'll be
Thank you.
talking to you soon. Thank you again for all your hard work and all the effort that went into town meeting. So with that, we now move to the joint meeting with the Agricultural Commission, Conservation Commission, and Land Stewardship Committee for the discussion of management and use of town lands. As I mentioned, there will be opportunity for community support. Really quick process check. My understanding is that both the Agricultural Commission and the Conservation Commission are not meeting tonight. You didn't post a meeting, correct?
Correct, for
Correct.
conservation.
Yep. And agricultural as well?
We're not having an official meeting tonight.
Okay. And then the Land Stewardship Committee, do you have a quorum and do you want to open a meeting?
We have a quorum
Okay.
and,
You would just open the meeting and do a roll call of who's here and identify who might be attending remotely.
okay, I am opening the meeting and, I'd like to do a roll call. Warren,
Here.
Brian,
Here.
Claudia. Here. Dwight,
Here.
Rhonda. Here. Shane.
Here.
Suki. Here. Julie. Here. I'm here, Judy. Adam.
Here.
Chris.
Here.
Land Stewardship.
I did Dwight.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Point of, can I make a comment? I don't know how many of these people are. So I would appreciate them like stating their full name and where they live like we would normally do.
So
Okay.
this is a joint meeting, so they're official town of Carlisle board, the Land Stewardship Committee. They can introduce themselves, but
You want us to stand up?
I think as a courtesy, if you do speak, just say your name and address, as we will for all community members. So this is a discussion, just before we get into it, I did want to give some background for folks who may not be as familiar with how the process worked. As everyone knows, the town of Carlisle has over 30 conservation parcels, nearly 1,100 square acres of land, places like the Cranberry Bog, Boss Farm, Toll Land. And the management of each parcel falls under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. And the Conservation Commission already has a lot of work on its plate, managing wetland protection, legal compliance, not to mention the management of 30 parcels of land. So in 2005, they formed the LSC, that at the time the Land Stewardship Planning Committee, to essentially do the planning and serve as an advisory role to CONSCOM. And from 2005 until last year, essentially that committee worked in an advisory fashion for CONSCOM. In May of 2024, CONSCOM approved new LSC responsibilities, which granted authority to the LSC for the following: management of Carlisle Conservation Lands agricultural licenses, management of all activities on the conservation lands, including usage permits, management of invasive plants, protection of native species, and some other things. But essentially, last year and for the past year, the LSC has been operating under their current charter and their current responsibilities that were approved last May by the Conservation Commission. And so tonight, there's over the past year, there's been comments and some concerns voiced about how that process is working. So what we want to accomplish tonight is A, get everybody in the room. B, I'd like to hear from the Conservation Commission and the LSC at the beginning to understand the process as it works now and get your, after doing this a year, get your assessment of how it's working. What's the working relationship between CONSCOM and the LSC? What seems to be working well? What are things that you're looking to improve? After that, we'll hear from other stakeholders like the Agricultural Commission and certainly community members to allow them to voice their concerns, ask questions, and all of this to inform the select board so that we have a better understanding of some of the issues that are being raised and some of the processes that are being used. Ultimately, the select board is the appointing body of CONSCOM, the Agricultural Commission, and the LSC. So not only is this of great interest to the town, but as an appointing body, it's important that we understand the dynamics at play. So what I'd like to do is begin with maybe a statement or comment from CONSCOM, and then maybe followed by the LSC about, from your standpoint, after enacting these new responsibilities a year ago, how's it working from your standpoint, and how is the working relationship with the LSC? And if they should probably go up to the microphone, correct? I don't know how well it picks up from.
Yeah, that's a good
Is
idea.
that the microphone?
Yeah, just anywhere up there is fine. And if you could just say your name out of a courtesy.
My name is George Shepard. I'm the chairman of the CONSCOM committee for all of 6 months. How exciting. So anyway, the CONSCOM thought long and hard about the amount of work that we've been doing. And we're feeling overloaded with NOIs and site visits and that sort of thing. And we were looking to offload some of that workload. And LSC kindly said, we'd like to help out. And can we go in to manage the individual parcels of conservation land in Carlisle? And we thought that was a great idea. So we did pass a Conservation Commission requirement that they be able to take over the management of the individual properties, all 30 of them, and recommend usage, and then bring those recommendations to the town, in particular, Conservation Commission, AgCom, and so on, in order to say, here's what I'd like to do with this one. I know the recommendations were whether we're doing native plants or what we can do with the land as far as agriculture is concerned. But the LSC has really stepped up to the plate, done a very comprehensive plan for many of the pieces of land. I know in particular, Kloss Farm has been a big issue. Woodward is a big issue right now. And there are other issues that we're trying to manage as best we can. So I came here tonight basically to, pardon me while I play with my table, to listen to what the public is interested in. I'm worried that the transparency, did I unplug myself? Oh, now I'm locked. That the amount of transparency we have with the public and other commissions is below what we would like it to be. So I'm hoping to hear from AgCon and so on. I've been talking to Mark and what his issues are. So I'd like to hear what the concerns are from the public about how we manage the land. And admittedly, we have LSC and then we have CONSCOM. So between the two of us, we'd like to understand better what's going on.
How would you describe, how's the working relationship between CONSCOM and LSC? I assume you have liaisons, and is there a good flow of information and communication between the two
I've got
communities?
so many emails from Judy on what's going on in the LSC, and hopefully I'm responsive enough. So the communication is good. There are always some issues that need to be resolved, and she will come to me or vice versa. So I have no problem with the communication structure as it is.
Do you guys meet jointly, periodically?
Typically not. She has her role And then whenever there is an issue or they make a recommendation, it gets sent to Conscom, and then we get to assess what we think about that particular application.
So I know Sylvia's transitioned, but in Sylvia's role and then rolled up the new, whatever that's called,
Administrator,
is that a resource available to both committees?
yes, it is. And we're so happy that Sylvia is still going to be participating. I've got 4 people that we're interviewing for the Carlisle administrator role, starting on the
And does
16th.
LSC have a vote in that process as well?
Chris Spinney.
Yes, actually you did, right?
Chris Spinney's on the,
Judy? Pardon?
Chris Spinney is on the,
That's right. Chris is representing LSC in
So they
that
have a-
particular role.
they have a vote.
So we have resumes for 4 participants, which will happen next Monday and Tuesday.
Good.
Everybody gets an hour interview.
Okay, good.
I can hardly wait. Well, I'm the hiring manager for my business where I am, so I'm well versed in being able to handle interviews.
George, one other quick follow-up.
Sure.
When you're getting emails and reports, from Judy for the LSC, do you also share those with the rest of Conscom?
They typically come up during the Conservation Commission meetings. So here's what I learned from X and Y and Z. And so it modifies the agenda that we actually present. Yes.
So a Conscom member, if Judy had sent you something in advance of a meeting,
We'll see
laying out
exactly.
something, does that you then make sure that goes to the whole
For
Conscom?
example, all the Foss Farm traffic that's going on right now, everybody has seen
Mhm,
what the results from Warren and so on and the tests and whatever.
right,
So we're not doing blind things. Everything's
yeah.
communicated, available, and we're also open to questions.
Mhm. Okay.
But you say the amount of transparency is below what you would like it to be. What would you prefer to see?
I got a little blindsided when we went into, and I must admit, I'm new at this job, on how we're going to manage some of the property. And I think that, for example, the AdCom wasn't informed enough about what was going on in the LSC or the Conscom. So I think we need to be able to at least identify a person in every one of the committees that's interested in a topic and make sure that they're informed about what we're talking about, when we're talking about it, and who else is going to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Does someone from the LSC want to add to George's comments in terms of the current working relationship with Conscom and some of the transparency questions that have arisen? Yeah, please, yeah.
Come on down.
Come on, Dan.
So I'm Judy Asperkoff. I'm currently one of the 2 co-chairs of Land Stewardship Committee. Well, I feel that LSC and Conscom work really well together. Conscom has been supportive of us when people have been confused as to why LSC basically was choosing to say we have authority to make a change, or we have authority to be concerned about what's happening on this conservation area. And when the people have been perturbed because it's a change. I mean, everybody is always concerned when something that they love or their passion is, or it's their work, farming, okay, and somebody recommends a change. This is not necessarily received well. And who are you to make that kind of change or that decision? And Conscom has been wonderful in supporting us and saying, look, we voted for them to do this job for us. They have a charter, they are following the charter. And so I'm one of the 2 co-chairs. Never been a chair before in my life, okay? So if we've done something a little not quite perfectly, then we're learning, okay? And that's what this meeting is for, on how to move forward.
But I'm not hearing, Judy, is there a problem to solve? Because George is saying it's working pretty well, right? Is it now, is there some part of it that's not working well or could work better?
What I'm saying it doesn't work all that well is that the communication with the rest of the public is
Ah,
not very
okay.
clear. So for example, the AgCom,
Right.
I've never, I know one member of it, as far as I know.
Well, let's distinguish between the public. I'd say there's several levels, right? There's the public.
Right, everybody.
There's
Sure.
the us, because we're the, not the boss, I guess. What's the right word? We're the appointing authority. And then there's those related committees that may have a stake in the outcome. It could be ESC.
Agreed.
It could be crack, I guess. I'm not really sure what they do even, but you know, so when it relates to some of the 30 properties have agricultural things, right? There's not a relationship between LSC and ag on that.
Well, I won't speak for the LSC, but you know,
Yeah.
for example, crack, I have a member on the Conscom
Yeah.
who's a member of crack.
Yeah.
And
So is that working
I didn't
okay?
know.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Okay,
he's
good.
very vocal and he's much more experienced than I am. Sorry, Brian.
So
And LSC has a liaison to the Ag Commission
Okay.
recently.
recently, so it's right.
So we're trying to start some communication.
Yeah.
But I will say that in general,
Yeah.
there's been a directive, okay, from town hall, that the conservation lands are to be managed by Land Stewardship Committee working with Conscom. And they're not necessarily managed for the contractor that might be working on it. Okay, so that doesn't mean we don't listen to their concerns.
Right.
Okay, we had one of the farmers up in our meeting tonight,
Okay.
concerned about the fact that we would like to get more information on possible chemicals. Okay, that's fine. We listen to them. Okay, we're still gonna gather some material so we have knowledge. Okay, but we recognize this is a well-loved person in Carlisle. And it's only fair to listen to what they have to say.
Right. So there's, I mean, we try to do the same, right? We try to listen to other input. Doesn't mean we're going to side with that person. There's no mandate that you have to, but it's good practice to reach out. So there's publicity that goes around your meetings, right? I mean, there's a public notice process, but that kind of gets buried. It's more, in my opinion, it's a contact sport. Like you have to reach out point to point, like chair to chair.
Yeah.
This meeting's coming. Hey, this meeting's coming up. We're going to cover this. You might want to send somebody, or just to say, post it at town clerk's office. It gets lost in the noise. So there's proactive reach out, and I agree with you, Judy, that it's incumbent on all of us who volunteer to try to make sure that relevant parties we can think of are, engaged. Doesn't mean you have to side. You can make a different decision, but at least they've had the opportunity.
Well, one thing I'll say for Land Stewardship Committee is that basically you guys signed off on us in late December. Okay, so we've been doing this for essentially just over 5 months.
Yeah.
As far as a lot of the activity. And when we start discussing it, it doesn't occur to us that, gee, this would be of a concern, okay, with another group. And so we get into it a little bit and then people are upset that they weren't included in the very beginning. But part of it was because we didn't know they would be upset, or we didn't know what direction we were gonna go. And so this meeting is great. We have a new chair, new vice chair coming on in July 1st. And they're hearing this right from the beginning. This is gonna make it flow even better.
Sure.
So,
You meet monthly, typically?
I'm sorry, what?
Monthly?
How often do you
Typically
meet?
Monthly?
We meet when we need to meet, which is always monthly. But sometimes we have had 3 meetings in a month. If it was something critical. So, and they're always posted. And anybody who's looking at the postings can see it. It's in the Mosquito, it's in online. So we prefer to meet.
Well, again, not to put the burden on the chairs of the committees for the reach out, the other way, which was mentioned, is liaisons, formalize the liaison, and then it's incumbent on, if ag wants to be part, give them a liaison spot.
Ag is welcome to come every single meeting.
Judy, did I hear you say you have recently appointed somebody from LSC to be a liaison to ag? Is that what you
They
said?
volunteered,
No,
yes.
yeah, sorry. But
Yes.
yeah, so you have a volunteer from the LSC whose job it is to stay in touch with the Ag Commission, and what's that person's responsibility? I'm just interested in how that was described. What do you see them doing?
They've gone to some of their meetings and they've come back and we've asked them to share with us what they learned at the meeting. So that has happened. The sharing part has happened, I believe, once.
Mhm.
But again, we're getting going.
Yeah. So maybe following up on David's comments, that person could also be somebody who thinks in advance when, you've got your agenda set for the next meeting, maybe I should reach out to the Ag Committee and say, we're going to be discussing such and such a property that has some, agricultural work going on it. You might want to have somebody come, right? So it's kind of an encouragement to participate as well as communicating back and forth. Yeah. Yeah. And similarly, the Ag Commission might decide, right, that they want to appoint a liaison who's making sure they're trying to stay in touch with the LSC.
Let me just add
Yeah.
from my standpoint, I feel remiss in not understanding that particular, who do I reach out to? And because for the year or whatever before I became chairman, I didn't know there wasn't a communication issue with the AgCom. And so it certainly makes sense to find a person who can be the point of contact that you say, here are the issues that we're going to be talking about this week. You're welcome to join. Anything in particular you'd like to comment on? We'd appreciate knowing what you think is important. And, that's my naivete on my part. I'm sorry.
But I asked you about administrative support. I mean, one thing that I do as chair of a committee when I'm on, and fortunately here we have an administrator, Gretchen can support, you have whoever will replace Sylvia. Put them on the regular distribution list, right? You have an agenda, you circulate, besides the posting part.
I understand.
Generally, you circulate it among your members. Hey, this is what we're going to cover. You just add that person, and
Well, I'm
then
looking
they
for,
have.
who from the ad committee should I be communicating
Well, you
with?
ask the chair, and
Well, you know exactly right. I haven't done that.
right.
We didn't do it before.
All I'm saying is, George, to put it on a little bit of autopilot, where you don't
I
have to
agree. I
constantly
agree.
do it like it's a set.
Yep, I appreciate that.
I'd like to open it up to AgCom. We've been talking about the process. Is there someone here that wants to speak to, from your vantage point, how it's working?
John was going to come up.
I think the question is wants to.
You win.
But I
Introduce me.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah.
that the conversation.
John, can you just introduce
Oh,
yourself?
I'm sorry. My name is John Lee. I live at 65 Willow Street, and for what it's worth, I've been past chairman of the Conservation Committee. I'm the conservation for the year. I've served 15 minutes on the Conservation Commission. I'm a professional farmer, conventional and organic. So I have some background in this field. I think the issue heretofore, despite earlier words, I think the reason we're here tonight is there's been absolutely no transparency between the LSC and the Conservation Commission on the issues related to certain parcels in the town. The only reason that the AgCom has found out about these issues is that Mark Duffy has raised them with us, which is his duty. And we reached out to their liaison who came to our meeting, and we asked him, I mean, is there a communication that's been passed around that we should know? And he said, you didn't get it? And I said, no, we haven't been apprised of anything that's going on with any of these parcels. The AgCom for the purposes of this discussion, has been completely left in the dark. It would not be too much to say that we've been ignored. We have been told that we are not a commission, we're a committee, and therefore have almost no standing. But there's a real issue with communication and transparency between the LSC and the AgCom. There is none. Were it not for the generosity of the time of their liaison, which we didn't know we had. So this is a problem for the AgCom. And I think it's a problem in the community. We have heard from other people in the community that there's no communication between abutting landowners and the issues that the LSC is working on. And there are a lot of people who are very unhappy with this lack of communication. The second item in the charter of LSC's charter is that one of their important roles is that their duty is to inform the public and to communicate with the public and other boards exactly what they're up to. This has not happened. They've not communicated with the farmers. They've not communicated with the Agricultural Commission. Now, this is a problem. I might yield my time to Sam Pietropolo, who has had significant issues with the Land Stewardship Committee. I don't know if he's here tonight, but if he has complained twice to the Board of Selectmen, and he's a very articulate spokesman for this group, and I will yield my time.
Well, yeah, we're not necessarily allocating time like a government hearing, but I do want to give an opportunity to respond to some. I mean, you've talked about how you're working to improve your communications. It's a different picture to say you've been shut out of communications. How do you respond to that in terms of, is that an oversight? Is that something that is improving or will improve? Or just, I'd like to hear your reaction or your response to what he said.
Part of the issue is if you send an email to the town AgCom email, it is not picked up. Okay, so I've encouraged other people in our committee to send it directly to John Lee.
Right.
And then he can get it. Okay, so it might be that we could do better. It might be that we need to learn to use the town email system better. I don't mean we, but.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're all just trying to
Right.
Work with and create a fair, transparent process, right, for how we use these conservation lands. And so whatever any of us can do, transparency, as we know as select board members, is critical. And so if transparency isn't working, we need to fix that. And there's a lot of tactical ways you can do that, and there's some behavioral ways we need to do that. And so it does sound like that can improve, and it sounds like will improve. And I think part of what we want to ensure is it does improve. But I think above all, the transparency, the communication, there's no dispute in terms of what the charter is and the responsibilities, but it's still incumbent on the committees and the people doing the work to make sure other viewpoints are included, that they feel like the process is fair and transparent. So, and that's not, I don't want to point fingers with that, but I think everyone needs to keep that in mind, that no matter what we're talking about, we all need to be working on improving that. And if you're not getting it, you need to let people know you're not getting it. And it's just inherent to what we do.
I have worked with Gretchen in the town hall.
Yep.
About who exactly should be getting email and if I post minutes, it goes to the right people.
Right.
So, I mean.
So it seems like there's some basic tactical things that we need to improve in terms of emails, contact information. That stuff is fixable.
So she knows who to send AgCom email to.
But I've never seen anything from the ConsCom perspective about AgCom minutes or anything.
Well, I think in this case, we're specifically talking about the LSC.
Well, I understand. Okay.
But you know, it might be worthwhile though to include the chair of the conscom,
I'd rather.
as well as the LSC, when about what you're working on is the AgCom.
Certainly,
Or-
and it might be valuable to have a member of the AgCom on the LSC, so there's a more direct
Yep,
communication.
yeah, yeah,
Either member or liaison. I mean, that's
yeah.
more information to Travis's point. I mean, just Scott's point. More transparency is better, more inclusion is better, and there's really a zero cost. That's why I was saying autopilot. There's a zero cost to say, gee, ESC, land steward, ag, maybe, I don't know, I can't think off the top of my head, but you could say there may be 3 or 4 committees. Maybe, I mean, we call land use committees, Board of Health, Conscom, Planning Board.
Planning board.
I mean, there's no
Yeah.
cost to including somebody from every committee on the agenda of every meeting. That way they can look at it. It's up to them. Let them decide if A, they want to appoint a liaison, and B, if they haven't done so, does that liaison attend meetings? I mean, it's a burden. We all have, time is limited, but at least they know. And then it's up to them to decide if they.
And town hall's a resource. I mean, if you don't know who you should be contacting, I mean, Ryan, Gretchen, get Aubrey, hi.
Just trying.
Hide them in the corner.
You can't
I mean,
wear pants like that and hide in the corner.
The select board, right? Contact us. I mean, it's better to deal with these things early than deal with them after the fact or late, because again, none of us want surprises at the end of the day. We want to make sure, and transparency doesn't mean people are getting their way. It just means that everyone feels like they have a voice in the process. They understand the process. They know what's happening. They can, and if they disagree with the outcome, that's fine. But the process to get there has to be open and perceived as fair. That's critical. Do we want to, I would like to hear from the community as well. If Sam, you want to make a statement, or someone else from the community wants to chime in. Yeah, do you want to, can you stand up and state your name, please?
I'm just curious. Why don't you come forward though, Amanda, because people that won't be able to hear it in the recording may not pick it up either. Thanks.
Do we need to stay here?
You might have to come back.
Oh,
though.
good. The hot seat is available.
I just have a question.
Yeah, no, come on up and have a seat.
Thanks. As a member of the public, where can I find this process outlined for how decisions are made with regard to land use?
There was a charter that I found.
And when you say land use, do you mean just broadly? Or specifically on Conscom or LSC?
Yeah.
I guess so, in a couple of ways. Just generally, how committees in Carlisle have a process, like a unified decision-making process, voting on issues, things like that?
So you raise an interesting point. There is a charter that outlines the mission and responsibilities of committees, but it's incumbent on the committees or the committees they report to define a strategic plan and or process by which they want the committee to operate. That's something we do a lot of in the select board, a lot of policies and procedures that outline how we want things done, how maybe not how they're done today, but how we want them done, for ourselves and for the future. And so it's an excellent point. Is there a process by which the land stewards, the LSC, determines this, or is it really a case by case? You really look at each parcel. It's a unique event, and it's an open question of whether there should be a process and a plan put in place that guides the decisions.
Right. And to add to that, when the select board is looking at these issues, we often, we not only try to invite the public, and we talked about the positive reach out to all the committees and the people, but we're community servants. People who are in this room all volunteer our time. We're trying to help others in the community. So if you have a process in place, like you're talking about, where you can have the select board often will have 2 meetings to have an issue discussed, because the first meeting you can kind of talk about it, and then at a second meeting the people who weren't able to attend the first meeting, you can have public input, and then you can make a better, more informed decision with public input. And that's what we try to do, and I would actually encourage the Land Stewardship Committee, if they're not already doing that, and every other committee to take a process-oriented approach like that, because I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand. Is there like a
Yeah.
clear process or not? Because as someone who's trying to follow it and like really, really trying, like spending time, I feel like it's very confusing and it's subjective when different committees operate differently. And I find it just really frustrating.
So it's not a process answer, but the current responsibility lies with the LSC for things like agricultural permits. So you would have to go to the LSC for that. They're a subcommittee of the CONSCOM, so the CONSCOM kind of oversees it in the general sense. But in terms of your question of what's the process they use, they might use a process and not have it documented. You have to talk to the LSC, and I think we're encouraging there to be a process by which, and it doesn't mean it could just be a methodology of planning, public outreach. Process can be different things. I don't know if there's a process in place. Has LSC, you haven't been up and running in this fashion for too long, but is there a process that you can point the public to say, this is how we approach a parcel? I mean, there's steps you take.
We did it exactly like Sylvia has done it for 25 years.
But is it written down?
Is it something that the public can access and read and understand?
We don't have it written down, but we actually, in our meeting upstairs a short time ago, we devised a bunch of different new responsibilities, and each one of them was agricultural license person who works through it. So basically we're working towards that, was decided irrelevant to this meeting. So.
Okay.
But I also, if you don't mind, Ryan, I'd love it for you to just comment on the role that town hall has, you in particular as a procurement officer, on these leases regarding other, I hate to use the word vendor, but farmers being given a lease to grow or use our conservation lands for their purposes.
So you're asking about the use of conservation land and how that's licensed.
I was asking about just like generally speaking, like not even targeting LSC specifically, although that's why I'm here. But I was speaking more broadly just about like generalized processes.
So if it's just municipal land, so municipal land owned by the town of Carlisle, then the select board is in charge of that land unless it's been identified in some other way, which is very rare. The land that's being discussed tonight is conservation land. So Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution allows communities to conserve land under that particular article. And the Conservation Commission, which has been adopted by Mass General Law, is the governing body here. So the Conservation Commission is in control of it. There's some legal requirements on some of the parts. So there's 30 parcels that you're talking about. Each one has its own. It was donated for this reason, or it has this trust on it, or it has these requirements that need to be met. So that is a hurdle you have to get across. And then there's a licensing process. So the Mass General Law is pretty vague on this. There are certain things you have to follow, like the procurement law, but a town has to develop its own process for this. There is no laid out process like you might think there would be. But for a licensure, like we're talking about here, you have to fairly advertise it and describe what service the town wants from that, and then receive competitive proposals. So if you said, we want to grow, I'm going to pick something that's not controversial here, pumpkins. Is there like a pumpkin land? So you would say, we want someone on this conservation land to grow 100 pumpkins of this size. And then you would put out that specification, and then you would receive proposals back from people that say, I'm going to grow you the best 100 pumpkins in this particular way. And then you can grant that license. The difficulty with licensure, as opposed to leasing, like you might be used to in a non-municipal setting, is licensure is subject to change. It is not a permanent thing. So you can't say for sure you will have this license for 10 years, 15 years.
That's a good question. Sorry. So at that point at which different proposals are brought forward, if there are concerns raised by the public or by anyone, what happens then?
So it's a good question. The more upfront you are with your proposal request, the more you can have a say in what's done. But once you say we want those 30 pumpkins grown or 100 pumpkins, if someone comes back and says, I can do this, for the cheapest or the most amount of money, or in this way, if they're responsive to your request, there isn't a lot of ability to wiggle back and forth. So the real answer is you would have to send out your proposal so that everybody had a chance to react to the new change that this person has brought in. So it's not extremely conducive to change midstream, if that makes sense.
Can I ask, do you have a specific issue?
Right,
You'd
yeah.
like to, as an example of what you might like to put before the town?
I'm sorry, what are we talking about?
You have a specific, where do I go to do something regarding some land? If you're gonna build a new house, the notice of intent comes to the Conservation Commission.
Just trying to understand how decisions are made regarding different parcels.
So
of
you don't have a particular issue that you're interested in. How do I
licensing, I guess.
licensing
How those
as a
decisions are
farmer
made.
when you want to license a piece of land?
So
I'm
the
sorry,
best,
I just
the
don't
best way
understand
is,
Sorry,
how
maybe
this
this
is,
is
like, relevant.
off the line, sorry.
It just sounds like you have a specific.
I'm just trying to understand the process of how the licenses are appointed and how the land use can change. And as a member of the public, how things are voted on, especially when there are concerns raised about a proposal for a piece of land that was under licensure.
Right, I think that gets back to transparency and making sure that when parcels are being looked at and decisions are being made, that people can find that information.
Right.
And whatever the process is, you're aware before the fact that
Yes.
that this is happening. So there's not a clear, easy answer.
Right. I just want to say, as
Yeah.
a member of the public, it's really not transparent.
That's true.
It's really difficult to understand, and
Yep.
I would just like to be able to. So that's why I'm asking these questions.
Thank you.
Take it as I think I can.
Can you just state
Yeah,
your name?
Andrew Rogers, 185 Concord Street.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. So to make it more specific with Woodward, I was asked by Sylvia to take care of that land. And I had a license for a number of years. I think I did a really good job managing that land. And then all of a sudden, like a little piece was taken away. And then I wasn't told anything about not being able to use the rest of the land, but ultimately the rest of Woodward Field was taken away from me being able to have a license to it. And it just, again, seemed like, how is this decided? Is this actually in the best interest of the public? Was the town consulted? Were neighbors consulted? I certainly wasn't consulted about how this would affect my business and, the members of the community that I feed. And so it seems like there's a real problem with how the LLC is deciding what and how they want to use these lands, and certainly how they're communicating.
so this is helpful for me for staff management. So when you say Sylvia gave you the land, what does that mean?
Well, Sylvia was running, she would sort of issue the licenses on behalf of the Conservation Commission.
In a
And-
public meeting, or she just did this?
And I forget it was in a public meeting, it was here.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. It was Conscom. Conscom did it, but Sylvia was sort of my point of contact with it. And she was one who came to me, and David Friedman, when the land was purchased in the town, I got the grant to help pay for it. And it seemed like the objective of that land was agriculture. And they thought it was a really good fit for Clark Farm to come in, pay it or graze it. And again, I felt like we did a really good job. I think the neighbors were all very happy. I think that my CSA members were happy. And then a little bit was taken away without much of a discussion. And then, it was supposed to be like a little trial, a little study. And then the rest of the land was taken away. And I don't understand. And so that, you know, as a grower, I'm sure you guys can imagine if you're running a business and you don't know if you can have, you know, a piece of land, it makes it really difficult to plan. It really affects my profitability.
No,
And
it's native.
Andrew, do you mind if I add in on that?
sure.
That was your name, please.
Susan Paulo, 110 Maple Street. I'm kind of in a butter to Woodward. It's the best I could follow once we finally got some documents out of LSC that they were not sharing, is that there was a best use determination that was made. And the best use was the co-chair Judy saying she thinks flower farming's best there.
She thinks what? I'm sorry.
She thinks flower farming would be best there.
Flower.
That was the original.
That's
reason why we were-
that's the decision. That's the best that I can find with lots of research and lots of requests for more information. The best use is one person's opinion. And it was supposed to be a trial. There were supposed to be votes, and as best I can tell, and there was a member of even of LSC. Wait, we said this was a good concept. We never voted on it to be reality. She shushed by a person on her own team, on their own team. And then there's an advertisement where that same gentleman who tries to lift the group from LSC and tries to have exposure, tries to say we should slow down, we should have public input. And that one person, Chris Spiney, tries hard to elevate that group to doing the right thing, and he's voted down every time. So even there's in their group, there's all kinds of conflict about exposure and sharing information, get public input. There's a few Carlisle mosquito articles that says, let's get some public input, and there's never been any action. So there's words and then there's actions, and the actions are at 180-degree turn from the words. So I have to say, it's been changed because of one person's opinion. No,
I don't necessarily want to.
Okay,
I think
okay.
what's clear is that there's a lack of transparency,
Okay,
so
fair.
I don't necessarily want to infer how the
Okay,
decision was
fair.
made.
Okay,
But
that's
I think what I'm hearing
Transparency, that's a better way to say it.
is a year ago, the process changed
Yeah.
by virtue of the CONSCOM giving new responsibilities to the LSC. And it from the people that were operating under the previous process do not feel like they were told or made aware of the new process or where they fit into that. And that's back to transparency and proactively communicating
That's fair.
out to the stakeholders.
Can
So
I just
I
say-
don't necessarily want to make judgment on the.
That's
Okay.
fair. I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I appreciate your clarification. You're better at words than I am. I wanted to say two more things. One is that what do we do next? Because I'm very confused that we have a member of LSC that is on crack, on CONSCOM. Not the way that sounded. He is if you look online, he's a Conservation Commission liaison. And tonight was voted chair of LSC. One person. And when that person, and this is my last point or question rather, is does this committee have an understanding that LSC is acting with licensing signing approval?
Do we as a select board
Yeah,
understand that?
do you know that? Okay, that you're aware, because if they're making a plan and the plan is different and there's no exposure and there's no community input and they get to in a bubble, make a decision and sign on it in themselves. Even CCF had no clue. 2 weeks later, they found, but they're like, what? They signed what? Nobody knows. Okay. And then there's one person who's now the chair of LSC. I'm not saying he's a bad person, but he's on 4 positions. And my understanding is a non-resident. So how is this working?
Mm-hmm.
How are we having one person who on CONSCOM seconds a motion to give LSC signing privileges for contracts, and then he's the CONSCOM representative, and then he's voting as LSC? Doesn't that seem a little bit like not fair?
So I do want to give CONSCOM/LSC a chance to,
That's all I have.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sue.
And, Sam, in a moment, yes.
Yeah.
Is there anything in terms of clarifying what happens? I mean, in the beginning, you talked about the process and you felt there was good communication between CONSCOM and LSC. What we're hearing or what people are stating is from their standpoint, they're not aware of what's going on that gets back to transparency and process, but some of these other issues, do you have any comment on them?
Well, from my standpoint, I already noted that I don't know, I don't have point of contacts for all these other commissions. That's my naivete. And we can certainly correct that very easily. We had an eloquent speaker right here. Be nice to have her join LSC or Conscom or run for, she'd make a good chairman for the Conscom, but I just think that, well, you've been saying it all night, and we talked earlier today, and transparency is the key issue. And how do we get the communications lines open up? And I don't know about one guy being on 4 committees. That sounds like overload to me. But
That's Judy.
Yeah, the other thing I would I see the hand up, but just one quick comment, which is I think it's definitely about transparency and communication, but I also am hearing the question about making decisions. And that I think would be worth having more clarity on the part of the LSC and Conscom about, what you would like to see within LSC in terms of making decisions on things like the leases, because responsibility, and it was done differently, in the recent past, and we also are trying as a town to be more compliant and do things that are the best practice for a town, allowing others to use their conservation land, right, for their business, so to speak, right, for agriculture. So I think that's another piece of this that would be really helpful to have spelled out. But yeah.
So Sue Provenzano, 80 Mill Pond Lane. So I think it sounds to me like there's sort of been a perfect storm, which has resulted in all these issues. So, George Shepherd was new as a chair. LSC got its independence or got all the land responsibilities. So the conservation administrator had a lot of health issues. And so I think all the normal ways of knowing what to do, were gone, LSC probably did the best way they thought. They thought they were doing it the way conservation had always been doing it. They just didn't know. They didn't know who to contact. There was no booklet or, instruction booklet on how to do all this. So, because there's some inaccuracies of what people have been saying, having been on the LSC calls. But, communication should be it, but we didn't have all the knowledge.
So, I want to just build on the point, if I can, and before you go to Mark. So we talk about transparency, but transparency has a lot of layers. So what we talked about mostly was the transparency of making sure people know that there's meetings and there's issues come up and let them represent it. But what Barney brought up and you're bringing up as well is very important, and it's transparency of process. Okay, so this town, if you go, Sylvia represents, I said it at her retirement and people yelled at me, they both say that, old Carlisle. But what I meant was traditional Carlisle. Traditional Carlisle, there was a lot of legacy knowledge that were in people's heads. We were smaller and we did stuff without documentation. And we had a lot of people who had long time tenure, not only on the professional side, but on the volunteer side. What we have tried very hard, and it's clear that we have to push that down again more, is transparency of process for a variety of reasons. One of which is you can't rely on legacy knowledge. You need to memorialize things and make sure that you've thought through. Like we have more probably procedures on whether to put a flag or a sign in the rotunda than whether the guy can grow hay. I mean, that's crazy, right? So we should have we should always look at things from an eye of what happens when, to your point, when a new person comes in, like where do they go? What's the manual? The other piece, which is very well managed by Aubrey and her team, is once you have that, put it on the website, like to whoever the young lady was over there, like you ought to be able to go to a place and see the process. we know how to get a trash sticker, right? You know how to do that now because it's pretty obvious. So, same thing. So I absolutely agree, but it requires a lot of work. And that's really incumbent on these committees when they get stood up to, you got to embrace the work. We'll help, but you have to embrace the work.
Thanks, Sam Pietropalo, 110 Maple Street. First of all, thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak, and also thank you for bringing this topic forward, because Travis, Travis Snell alluded to this earlier when he made the comment about, hey, we're all volunteers here. And I think you can tell by the number of people in this room tonight, the number of members that serve on these boards, right? Our town is special in the sense that it's like a family. Once in a while, you got to get in a room and you got to hammer things out. And that's where we are tonight, right? So no disrespect to anyone. There's a lot of, everybody's heart is in the right place. And I think we want to get to the right place. The process hasn't been great. It's been broken. We've all acknowledged that, which is a great step. What you're hearing from the public, is really, we need your help, the select board. We really need your help. Talking about things, and I think, Sue was saying actions speak louder than words. We need action to make a change. We can't simply accept what has happened and then say, we'll do better next time, because the harm has already happened. And that's what, in a few minutes, I'm going to ask specifically of you. I had a few things to say tonight, but I have to turn, and Amanda, when she came up here, I think she just encapsulated everything that we've been trying to share or communicate with all of the boards around what's happening with this use, which is a really simple question, is how do you determine best use? And listening for like the long, discourse, there's no answer because it doesn't exist. And all we've been asking is, you've been delegated a duty. We can dispute whether the delegation was good or bad. It doesn't matter. There's somebody in this town has been delegated a duty to manage and make decisions. And the question is, how do you get to that in a very objective, clear, transparent way? And it hasn't happened, and there's no answer to that. So to accept what has already been decided would be truly wrong and irresponsible. And so I'm going to pause in a minute here, but I do want to just, make note of, like, earlier when I heard comments about transparency, I just want to make sure that as a community, we're all aligned. Transparency is not a check the box. It's not posting something on the website. It's doing it completely, timely. The information that LSC and Conscom talked about when they do put things up is incomplete. All of the communications that are happening behind them, the deliberations, the public doesn't see those documents. We don't get a chance to see them, look at them. And the reason for the transparency and the reason that we all come out here is because there's such great ideas, experience in this town. And I don't want to sound like I'm on a soapbox, but I think it's an important context that the reason for open meetings is so you get the value, the enrichment of where people come from and the ideas they have to complement what all of these volunteer boards are doing. And if you take that away, then we're at a huge disadvantage, and then we end up in a situation like we are now. And so, really quickly, just a couple of really key points because they will support what I'm about to ask you. Within their own minutes, and please take the time to go look at them. But on February 5th, the LSC in their own minutes state, this project, talking about the Woodward, for instance, will be supported by informational outreach to the town. I challenge you to go through all of the Conscom's minutes, all of the LSC minutes, and please help us understand and see where, when, and how did that outreach happen. And I'm going to give you the answer to save you time. It didn't. Simple things like that don't carry through, put the public at a disadvantage, and we've been chasing for this information. The information that I finally received after multiple requests came after the license agreement was signed. What good does that do now? So that's why I'm here to ask you guys. I'm going to leave with you what I will call a request for a motion, a request for action. You've seen it in my letters, and I'm going to renew it here tonight. I invite you to read it into the minutes if you choose. If you want to take it outside, I will, because I know how, the time that you've given us. But really the ask is, we need you to do something, and really that doing something is to stop what's happening, allow us to back up as a community, re-look at all of this stuff, do not ratify or continue to endorse what's happening. And my comments are not critical, they're constructive. It's because it's what we need to do now. And to allow a farmer to come in and start doing things on Woodward Field or any other field again, is doing harm because we got to it the wrong way. So we can never really be sure that it was the right or the best decision. We don't know how, and I think someone else had mentioned, look at, what is the plan? We seem to be like just targeting, property after property without a holistic plan. And that holistic plan should tie back to the town's master plan. So all of this stuff is missing. And I thank you again for the time. And I really ask you to seriously consider what I'm asking in this motion and to take immediate action on it. So thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions from this board or as time permits from any other comments.
Thank you. We want to take a comment remotely from, is it Karen? Karen.
Hi, my name is Karen Panico, 187 Toffitt Road. I attended a number of LSC meetings as a reporter and some also as a resident. And I just want to add to the part about transparency, also about slowing down. One thing I noticed with the LSC process was that they seemed very focused on getting to the resolution and not so much on the process. And I really think that what Travis had said about allowing 2 meetings per subject so that one meeting you could discuss and then the next meeting you could take a vote is a really good thing that the LSC could do that would really improve their process. So that's all I'd like to say. Thanks.
Travis?
Well, I just kind of follow up on that. I think if we're trying to summarize what's happened tonight, I mean, we've talked about transparency and the, need to, and I think everyone's aware that, you need to post things properly. You need to, and I say this to all committees in town, but, have proper documented minutes, make sure that those are posted in a timely fashion, whatever the requirements are for posting. And I think it's helpful as community members to really advocate and reach out to these various communities through the chairs of various boards, but also if they're interested parties. Now, that creates some problems because then you have asymmetric information. You say, oh, well, I sent it to this person, but I didn't that. And so that can be problematic, but we need to make sure that these things are properly posted. But the other thing is process. And I would go back to saying, and I would really, and I would say this specifically to Judy, but to the LSC in general, you need to spend some time on process, on how you're going to have a written process and have that established for what you're going to do with your land use and how you want to do that. And I don't know, and I don't think we want to dictate that. This is why these are communities, and you need to, as a board, figure out what's a fair process. I'd suggested you have multiple meetings. You post those meetings, you allow public input. They're all important parts. I don't know if there's anything else that you, select board, would add to, a process, but I think the town administrator or others, if you need resources for, other committees, how they do it could probably provide you information. Conscom has a very defined process. If you want to do something with your land that's in a buffer zone or in the wetland protection area,
You can't do it. I'm sorry.
well, some people think that.
Yeah.
But they have a very defined process of notifying abutters and everything. And I'm not saying it has to be that process, but you need a similar defined process. And I really would charge, and I would hope the select board would support that, to charge them to come up with that process, because that's what you're hearing tonight, is that it's got to be fair and transparent.
I think we'll take a couple more comments. This is an important conversation, so we'll go a bit past our allotted time. So we'll do this comment, and then if you want to both come up.
I was just gonna ask for you now.
Sure. Okay. First, thank you very much. I'm Mark Felty, 247 North Road, Carlisle. I'm sorry. This is so important to me in the future of farming in this town that I don't want to rush too much. So I appreciate the fact that the selectmen's time is very, very important, but I think this issue is very, very important. So I'd like to start out by saying I've lived in this town for 38 years, raised my family, taking care of conservation land, brought the cranberry bog back from basically abandonment to state average, and then politics got involved and we're not raising cranberries anymore. But for me, I interact with the public all the time running Great Brook Farm. I love information. I love facts. I love people to know what I'm doing. So when the LSC got started down at Foss Farm, I said, I really want to talk to you. I really want to be part of the discussion. I want you to understand what I'm doing. I want to be part of that. And I continue down that trail. Now, I have an enormous responsibility as a user of conservation land and as a user of state park land. The truth of the matter is I don't own a square inch of land. In my front yard is a public water supply. Okay? All these things are very important. So when I saw what was going on with Clark Farm, I reached out to the people who work for me, who helped me decide how I'm to farm, the experts. What can you do? Because I can see things are going awry because some people have a different agenda. And I've been at town meeting before with people yelling and screaming about me for what was going on at Foss Farm and everything. I've been through this before. And so I love to solve issues rather than have issues. So the people who worked for me said is in towns that have a public water supply, farmers are using herbicides that are approved for use in zone 2 of a public water supply. And that is what I submitted to the land stewardship. The first response back was when I got a 19-page document about all the things that I had done wrong in the past at Foss Farm, with the approval of the Conservation Commission every year. We went through every single one every year. Okay, it was public for people who lived in Carlisle a long time. Some years it was very public, some years it was not. But where I am right now is I very much appreciate having an open discussion. But there's something that's even more important than that, in that instead of a group, a board, people representing the public, instead of them going around to see how much fear they can instill, how much misinformation they can do, they should really be focused on the facts, telling the truth. In the United States of America, there's over 90 million acres of corn raised. The majority of it is sprayed with atrazine. In the last re-registration for atrazine, there were over 8,000 scientific studies that were done. I was just told upstairs tonight that the EPA has advised that on Foss Farm atrazine not be used. No such thing occurred. So really where I am on here is could we have fact-based decision-making? I really applaud, and I've worked excellent with the Conservation Commission. They expect to make decisions based on facts. I would expect that the Land Stewardship Committee should, but I realize there's people who do not like conventional farming. I'm a conventional farmer. All these, I think they have an agenda. I realize.
Yeah,
that.
let's.
But this is not a personal thing.
No, I just want to, I finish up on the point. I just want to, we represent respect. At some point, I just want to, defend the individual.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so what it brings me to is so the wells were tested. Okay. And obviously it's documented with the approval of this town, the Conservation Commission. I have used chemicals on Foss Farm. Now, my understanding is the public has not had a response to whether they were detected, because there's all sorts of insinuations that they have contaminated the water.
Where are these well test
Yeah,
results?
I think I don't want to necessarily get into the specifics of these different tests and things. I'm not aware of the report or what the results are. So,
you're not?
So I think the point is made in terms of your position and some of your concerns. So I think with that, are there any other comments?
Scott, I do think, given that it's the public meeting and,
Yeah.
you know, the mosquitoes here, if there is an official report that has been completed about the testing of those shallow wells in the garden plot at Foss Farm, that it would be appropriate, I think, for just a simple statement about what those tests showed.
I'm aware of the test, but not the report.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we're not getting into the specifics of the report. We're going to keep this at this point on more process level. Yep.
Hi, Christina Christopoulos. I'm actually speaking for the ESC with their permission. So there's a number of issues. Suki's perfect storm with having AgCom being relatively new and everything else. Definitely.
Please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just iterating Suki's point of the perfect storm with AgCom being relatively new, LSC being relatively new, big transition with conservation staff. So I completely understand their process issues. I just want to put a big picture context. Best practice, science evolves, understanding of effects of certain conventional uses that were perhaps thought safe in previous times, perhaps under certain conditions. Now we understand that it's not. I will speak specifically for Foss Farm. My understanding is that the hydrogeology.
I'm sorry, I just don't want to get into the details of Foss Farm at this point.
Okay.
Keep it at
Okay.
some of the issues we've been discussing about process and operations and communications versus debating some specifics around a particular property.
Okay. Sorry, that threw me off a little. So I think what my understanding anyways is that LSC has been tasked to review the management and come up with best practices for management of conservation lands. Some properties are much more sensitive environmentally, much more complicated due to multiple uses, much more complicated due to the environmental conditions than others. And I think the start was to focus on those more sensitive parcels. It ties in with the master plan in that the number one priority that came in through the surveys was protection of natural resources and open spaces. It ties in with the whole embedding of environmental sustainability in municipal decision-making. The process could be a little more transparent, but I think to completely malign the efforts, to completely try to undermine and undo the LSC was following their charter. I think that really sends a bad message as far as volunteer efforts. I think we're at a place now where we need to ensure moving forward there is open communication, that we find a balance because we need to support our local farmers. Local agriculture is a huge part of environmental sustainability. Beginning to understand and beginning to plan for future more sustainable approaches is also a part. I think it needs to be done systematically, thoughtfully, with input to figure out how it can be done without huge ramifications to the farmers.
Yeah, but I don't mean to cut you off, but
Okay.
I do want to just take a couple of last comments. And I take your point in terms of the dynamics change,
Yeah.
but it goes back to having a process and transparency about how we the evaluation process, how it's communicated, the feedback from the farmers and the different stakeholders. So I think that's all.
And one quick final thing, let's not forget conservation. Let's not forget the environment in this balance, because that is also important. Thank you.
I'm gonna take maybe one more comment remotely. I can't see the name up there, so gentleman in the Yukon.
Yes, Yukon Huskies, right. Yeah, so I'm Mac Heisey.
Please introduce yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, Mac
I
Heisey.
can hear you.
Yeah, I live on Stern Street. I'm also a member of Environmental Sustainability Committee. I just wanted to add a couple of contextual points. One, the Environmental Sustainability Committee does absolutely support local farming. And I think something else that everybody could benefit from is just reviewing the right to farm bylaw that passed. And I haven't really heard that brought up in any of these conversations, but this was passed in 2019. And I think it's important information that everybody, I'm not going to go through it now, obviously, but I think it's just good context for everybody involved.
Thank you. At this point, if someone has a new or different comment to make, I'd welcome it. But if it's more examples of what we've already talked about, I think this select board, I can speak for myself, has gotten the message of some of the issues and concerns. Yes.
Can I make one comment?
Could you state your name, please?
Mark, if you've been the 45 Rockland Road, it's to be story. I just think it's unfair when all of this is going to be in the mosquito. If Warren doesn't tell this group what he told the LSC about the tests, because otherwise it's just unfair. So could you talk about if there was any atrazine? Because you said at LSC there wasn't.
That's getting down to the.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the
I know
reviewing the test results, but I
don't think
clearly this is a case of information that is of interest to the public. That, transparency, communication. So whatever the forum is to publish those results and get them out there, let's do that. Especially if they've already been shared in a public meeting, they should be available to all.
Scott, I'm sorry to maybe offer a different perspective, but I do appreciate that, the mosquito will be publishing, and it would be really helpful for the results of those tests to be made, to be sent to them directly then, as well as provided, we're not going to have minutes from your meeting until your next meeting, right? When you have to approve the minutes. So some way to make that report, maybe it's posted then on the LSC website, on the town website, but some way to have that information be available to the public immediately. Yeah.
If the town administrator.
Say your name, please.
Warren Lyman, guilty. If the town administrator who has been helping us in this process approves, it was my plan to send to every entity, committee, board, individual who got the original Foss Farm herbicide report, a copy of the analytical results tomorrow morning. And yes, every single analyte in every single well came up non-detect.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Warren. Okay. Did you have one last brief comment?
This is Sam Pietro Paul, 110 Maple Street. Just a procedural question.
Yes.
I forgot to ask. So on sort of the request for action that I provided to the town administrator, is that something that will be read in, or how does that get handled? So I just want to get an idea on response or what the process would be for something like that. Admittingly, I'm presenting that to you tonight. So
Well, our stated policy, as reiterated tonight and should be adopted by other boards, is we will not make a decision on the night that we undertake the issue. So I suggest to the chair that it be placed on the agenda for next time, and we will really think of it.
And it will be entered into the minutes and on the record.
Mr. Chair, just to be helpful, Sam, right?
Yeah.
So you really should send this to the Conservation Commission, because the Conservation Commission controls conservation land. So while the select board has leadership authority in this town and appointment authority, they cannot do many of the things you're asking here. So they don't have the ability to tell the CONSCOM, stop. They cannot appoint the CONSCOM, but the CONSCOM is the one who has to decide conservation land.
And maybe it's a topic for the next meeting, but I would want to try to understand a little bit then, if this is a delegation, at some point, it goes back up to the leader, and this is the leadership of our town, And so this is why I'm making a request to you, because these requests have been dismissed, ignored, and not responded to. So where else does the public go? And where you pulled together all the public and all of these boards, it seemed like an appropriate forum to reintroduce that and ask this board to give, if you can't do it, you could at least give direction through your delegation of delegations.
Just real quickly, I do talk about structure a lot because I think it's important to inform the public. So by Mass General Law, once the Conservation Commission is appointed, they have full authority over all conservation matters. And you would probably want that if you had a select board that was anti-conservation, right? You want them to be separate, which was discussed a lot at the town meeting, separation of these powers. So the select board's power here would be to unappoint everybody, the nuclear option, I would call it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I would just say, but there are limits, right? So when things, and this is no disrespect to the people, because I don't think necessarily is intended, but when it's grossly reckless, grossly negligent, that's at a different level. And so I do think there's a responsibility to ask the select board to step in and to take action.
I'm merely commenting on process, which we talked a lot about tonight.
Thank you very much. I think with that, we're gonna move on from this part of the agenda. The LSC does need to close your meeting. So if someone from the LSC wants to make a motion to adjourn.
LSC, motion to adjourn.
And again, I just want to thank everyone. This is obviously an important topic. It's a passionate topic. Let's all continue to be respectful that I do believe everyone is doing their best, doing what they think is the right way to do things. And clearly there's an issue here and we all need to work together to figure out how to move forward with this. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your comments. All right. And with that, let's move on to 9 o'clock personnel policies.
And that's okay.
20 minutes isn't bad.
No, that's not bad.
That's a
rugged start to your.
Yeah.
I mean,
We'll stand up and we can take a little stretch break, right? 2 minutes, let people leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit of course I'm, oh, they aren't, yeah. We'll be riveted. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but I can even have
See what that.
It's a young one.
You want to wrap that.
I'm surprised they weren't more.
Just trying to.
All right, Mr. Chair, you're gonna have to tighten up here. You gotta speed these things along.
He's very well organized.
She'll be organized. She'll be fast.
Barbara, you have 10 minutes. No.
This has been about a 2-year.
No, everything else is just us, so we can tighten it up.
Yeah. All right, let's go.
All right, Aubrey.
All right, so this is a strong pivot from the last topic. So as you know, part of my charge is to.
Excuse me. Would you mind? Yeah.
Guys, just take it outside, please.
Slot. Thanks, John.
Okay, update the personnel policies as needed. So this is my first formal meeting with you on what that will look like in the coming months.
Okay.
So why update the policies? Making sure that we're in compliance with labor laws, making sure that we're implementing recommendations from town council, making sure that structural changes are reflected in the policies, making sure that employee definitions and benefits definitions and leave definitions are all clear, especially for the finance department, and just to support employees correctly. So there's three main categories of the different updates. There's legal ones that are more urgent that we really should try to get them in the policies as quickly as possible, operational to make things clearer, and then there are staff recommendations that would warrant further discussion. And so that includes kind of a wide array of recommendations. Legal updates, they include making sure that we're compliant with labor laws, so that can include the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, FLSA, all of those may need to be in the personnel policies. And they aren't right now. The town council recommends adding a workplace violence policy. That's also just a general HR recommendation. What this means is we right now have an anti-harassment policy and a sexual harassment policy. But there isn't a policy for folks that might not fall into either of those categories. So if you're being, if there's a hostile work environment, unless you fall into one of those categories, you might not actually be protected from other employees. So we need to make sure that folks are protected that way. Also legally, now that the town administrator bylaw will be passed, we'll make sure that that is updated as well.
And are these generally kind of standard language policies, or is there?
Yes, there's generally some standard language policy that, a lot of towns will all adhere to. And we'll make sure that legal, make sure that they have all the information necessary.
And is there an expected time frame with the town administrator bylaw in terms of the special legislation? Because parts of it are active, right? That don't require the special.
Is any of it active? So I don't think any.
So that might, yeah. So we might have to wait until that's.
So anything under your jurisdiction, you can make active immediately.
Yeah.
You can do MOUs with boards that are willing to agree prior to its passage, which would give some delegation of authority.
Yep.
The actual passing of it, it depends on how hard you push the legislature. And that's true of any bylaw, not just the town administrator bylaw. But they start looking at new things in the fall. So I would suggest getting it on the radar with a chance to get it passed by the spring. Otherwise, it's going to be this cycle, which would be spring to now.
So
And can you go back for a second? Sorry, Travis, and just explain so when you said the thing about MOU is with different boards or committees, until the entire bylaw is approved by the legislature, you're saying that you don't have the authority to do the things that were approved in the TA bylaw unless there's some additional agreement signed between, say, the select board and another board. Is that what you're saying?
So this board could vote to delegate all of your authority that's covered by the TA bylaw now. And the other boards can do the same thing. So the planning board, for example, could vote to change their HR policy to what the TA bylaw could be. It's not binding like the state law changes, but they could do that until it passes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would actually advocate that the select board do that now and take a leadership role to show, and then if it's a memo that goes to other boards and then that we have just done this as a select board and we encourage you to do the same.
Not tonight.
Yep.
Just take it.
Yeah, let's later.
Not tonight. We
learned of it.
Brought it up.
Doing it.
All right.
Right.
Fair enough.
That's right.
Yeah, we can do that.
Come on. Yeah, come on with a better idea.
You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
All right.
So that's a great point. So we'll look into that while we're reviewing this. So the operational updates, there's a lot of them. The board already approved the military leave. Also, the town approved removing the personnel board. So there's a lot of updates for that. And then clarifications and alignments. You're making sure holiday pay is clear, accruals are clear, leave is clear. Understanding what a part-time employee is versus a full-time versus benefits. There's a little bit of murkiness that we have to kind of problem solve with certain employees at any given time. So the finance department works hard to make sure that everything is as standardized as possible, but it should be made very clear in the policies. Making sure that any sort of overtime policy that applies to certain departments, that's clarified as well. And then just general operational adjustments, making sure there's mention about the group insurance, about safety and uniforms, detail pay, financial policy references, performance reviews, making sure that is updated, how promotions are managed, and resignations and so forth. So just making sure there's clear policies for all of these things, so there's no question of how, what's appropriate.
And do you imagine that, like for some of these, will there, to Scott's point, is there already kind of standard language that we can draw on? Or for
So it
some of these,
depends.
does it have to be developed from scratch?
Probably not from scratch. I think you can really work with other policies in other towns.
Mhm.
We're actually, our personnel policies are actually fairly up to date overall compared to a lot of towns, so we're in a good place. But I think we will have to cater to what our needs are in Carlisle, especially when it comes to clarifying the types of employees and everything, because that can kind of shift depending on, how employees are, how many different departments they work for and everything. So it does have to be fine tuned based on the current employees and what the needs are in town. But I would say a lot of them there's definitely a lot of standard templates in the HR backend that we all use as a starting point.
So, Aubrey, so for the first two, the legal and the cleanup stuff, I presume you already have words, you're already ready in.
Not yet. What I need first is, approval of what you want to look at and review, and then have that drafted, and legal have that review.
We don't, you'll draft, you and.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
And then staff recommendations. So this will be open for further discussion. I have included a variety of recommendations from staff, and, up to you as, the policymakers of what you would like to approve. Some of that will include paid parental leave, additional floating holidays, creating a sick bank. The recruitment appointments is more of my recommendation of making virtual job postings fine. It's still in the policies to make it physically posted in town hall, which doesn't make sense anymore. And then looking into standardizing lunch breaks, maybe adding a dress code. And there was a recommendation from somebody from finance about maybe a benefits waiting period. So it's a wide array of recommendations to discuss. And then the timeline. So I recommend meeting again in the next month to address and approve urgent policy changes, to just get them ready to go. So then we have those in there, so we're legally compliant. And then meet in August about the operational changes that aren't as urgent, but it'll be really helpful, especially for the finance department, to have that. And then determine how you want to address the staff recommendations, because there are a significant amount of them, and they cover a lot of different things, and it's up to you what makes sense for the town. So maybe if you wanted a working group to meet, or just meet again later in August, early September to discuss.
So, the first two categories don't particularly seem like they have a financial impact. They're more cleanup. The third bucket possibly does.
Yeah, that's a
So
good
that
point.
has to kind of marry up with the 27 budget process.
That's a good point, because absolutely.
I'm okay with a working group. I'm just saying that, part of that's going to be the cost impact, like we did with the benefits as we had a sliding scale of town contribution to.
Yeah.
Health insurance. Yeah.
What would the working group look like?
So I would run it and ask at least a couple of folks, and maybe, I don't know, if maybe a couple staff members as well, to give input and just meet and determine what makes sense to present to the select board, what makes sense to, change anything. So I would see it's just a smaller version of working with me on what we can present to the board as a whole.
Your kitchen cabinet.
Yeah.
Including get the financial consequences.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
getting finance to help with
Yeah,
that.
because some of the recommendations absolutely would have a financial impact,
Yeah.
especially additional holidays.
You're probably gonna need a working group for that. I mean, it's at least to do the initial options and some of the analysis.
Absolutely.
And then when it's semi-baked, the select board can look at it.
So I think my question too is just, I think if you were open to this, having me present first the the legal
Mhm.
recommendations of updates and have you have time to review those, ask questions and be able to vote. Once you feel confident that they are ready. So it'll take some time, but it will be good to get those in the books.
Yeah. So we can work that into the July, August. You were thinking about presenting those in July? So
Yes.
present one meeting and then vote on it maybe the
Yeah,
next meeting?
I think that would be great. That would work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, these seem like good to get done as soon as we can if they're legal urgent.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You definitely want to make sure that you have all the laws there.
And, and if some of the stuff under the operational is fairly easy to put forward.
Yes.
It doesn't require a lot of time to, spell it out.
Absolutely.
I would think we could also address some of those
Sure.
and get them voted on.
Sure.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah, if I could do both legal out and operational as one chunk to be able to review and then meet again to vote. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll get that on the agenda. Yes.
So this does sound easier than it's probably going to be. So that
Yeah.
some of these things are a bit of a yarn pull, right? Especially the operational, and then for sure the third category, which is so. And Aubrey did this, and my specific question to you is: it's going to take a tremendous amount of staff work to do like the detailed analysis of things like parental leave and others. So it would be more beneficial for you to have input first, like what you are not willing to consider, or what you do.
That's in the third bucket.
Yeah, because otherwise we're going to craft a recommendation that you might be like, this is trash.
Yeah.
I'm the working group,
Sure.
but in parallel, the first two seem like you should roll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Not-
Yeah, we'll have
not
to
too
figure out the
complicated.
timing on the third group.
Well, as I said, I think, yeah, so it sounds like it's just kind of a three-part process. We have to do like an overview sort of sniff test. Is this something we really want to pursue? Then you got to go and get some data, because we got to then say, well, what really does it cost to do it properly and look at maybe comparable towns, and then reconvene and decide, then you have to probably socialize at the select board level, which is around the time we begin to start thinking about the FY27 budget. Got to be a piece of that, right? And I guess if we decide it's really then something we want, then you got to go start making policy. But once you start making policy, we've kind of already pushed it into the budget, right? I mean, that's really happened at that point. Right? Just pushed it into the budget. So.
Yep, and then you're going to have other advocacy groups too. So the library trustees in particular have some interest in employee benefits. We have to compare with some of the unions that have benefits. So there's a lot to this, and each individual one I can picture you being interested in because of its implications and understanding it. So we're really looking, Aubrey and I, for feedback on how to make sure this process doesn't get unwieldy, because otherwise we're going to be this could take
My
6-7.
initial advice, without having really given a lot of thought, is kind of the way we approach the roads and the last go around. Like, here's the bucket, like here's the cut line, right? So we can think sort of holistically, like what is an incremental add to the town's labor costs that we think is a reasonable number on an annual basis, and what should let's prioritize what are the things that are most important, and it's in the cut line or it's not. I mean, there's some things that are worthy, but they just haven't bubbled up. I mean, we have to give it, that may not be the right approach, but we have to give it some structure so we don't just have this.
Yeah.
Right, this huge.
Well, I mean, in the agenda tonight, you had proposed a 3-part structure, right? The first, the most urgent legally implications. I mean, I think that has to happen, right? I mean, I thought the way she structured it was fine.
Well, no, that part's good.
Okay.
Buckets 1 and 2 cost roughly zero. I mean, there's legal time and stuff.
It's the third bucket.
It's the third bucket I'm talking about.
Right.
I see.
And then
So
we
you want to get those out of the way, so I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
let's start there, and then we got to look at what the fall looks like with the lead up to a fall town meeting, and how much in sync does it have to be with the budget process. So it's
really not I don't view it as a fall town meeting thing.
No. I mean, we don't want to start this thing and
and then derail it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So I think looking at the timing for when we'll actually have the bandwidth / you'll have the bandwidth too, to really dig into that third bucket we should carefully consider, because
Does
it's,
FinCom partner with you at all on assessing those costs?
I haven't yet, but I haven't I haven't updated this since I started, so that is a good.
So they would ask, what do you approve? And then they would analyze, or what do you want to
They
do?
would ask us,
Not gonna-
what is it we want to consider? Yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of backwards, though. We want to know what the cost implications are.
Well, we'll have-
Approve something. Okay.
Well, you would have to tell them what you were thinking of approving, and then they can see it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll move forward with the urgent stuff, and we'll get
Great.
that on the agenda first, and then we'll figure out timing for the third bucket.
That's great. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
You are
The
great.
amount of work that our
Yes.
sons,
Yes, it's evident.
seems simple, it's not gonna be,
No,
No.
but we need to get it done.
yes. Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 9:30, 10 minutes.
Caught up, actually.
Mean tested senior citizen property tax exemption vote.
Yep.
So there is information in the packet regarding the means tested. I don't know, Ryan, do you just want to speak to this?
Yep, so you've passed a means tested senior property tax exemption, which went through the legislature, and it allows you to adjust the eligibility from 100 to 200%. Well, it's really 0 up to 200%. Currently, you do 100%. That's what you pass, but you do have to set it annually. So our recommendation is to have, sorry, I'm just trying to save my.
Our being, when you say
The
our,
finance team recommendation, and the recommendation from the Board of Assessors is to keep it this year at 100%, but to have Brian come in and explain this to you. It's two reasons for that. One, to test the cost of the senior means tested property tax exemption for a year, so we can provide you that data. But secondly,
because this is the first year that it was just finally approved through special legislation at the end of last year. So this will be our first go around with it, correct?
yeah, so we want to test it. And second, we budgeted for what we think year one will be. So if you made it 200%, we would be unbudgeted.
Yeah.
And we budgeted it at 100%. Yeah.
Assuming a certain
Number of
number
people
of
we're
people.
gonna apply,
So,
yeah.
which could be higher or lower.
So you will have to vote this annually. We're suggesting year one, you keep it at 100,
Yeah.
and then we bring you data that says you may or may not want to change that in future years.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
And this motion is for the 100%, yeah. Do you want me to go ahead and make the motion? Get it on
Make the motion.
Okay. I move to set the fiscal year 2026 exemption amount under section 1 to 100% of the amount of the Massachusetts Circuit Breaker income tax credit pursuant to section 3 of the Acts of 2024, chapter 263.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I'm in favor.
Discussion.
Leave it at 100.
So do we want to take a vote?
Sure.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There you go. Now we are on to schedule summer. Ooh, select
Just-
board meetings.
Right, quick question on this. But this is an application process, is that right?
Yeah, nothing's
Ryan?
changed from the way it runs in the past.
For the
It's an
people have to apply.
people that think they may be eligible have to apply.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming we'll be working through the COA and other means to make sure people know.
COA and the assessing board.
Yeah, okay.
And that's all the materials here.
But that's no different than it's been.
I know, but I think we want to try to be proactive in indicating that, yes, that it's available. Yeah.
Watch it.
Rather than people not knowing about it and missing the deadline. Yeah.
All right. I know in was it in the TA report, you had potential or planned select board meeting dates? As we look to the summer, generally, what are people's schedules? Is the normal cadence a good one? Where we would have a meeting, we have a meeting scheduled for the 24th. The regular cadence would be July 8th, July 22nd, August, what? I don't have that in front of me. Do we want to stick to that cadence for the summer, or do people have major scheduling issues that we need to, that cadence is fine by me. And then there's the layer of the summer retreat / goal setting.
Right.
Do we want to build that in somewhere?
Yeah, I think we should do a whole separate
Goal setting.
session
Yeah.
for that.
We need to,
We're gonna need a clean agenda for that.
Yeah.
I would say, given the volume Normally some years we've kicked back a little in the summer, but given the volume of stuff we have to do, I think if this individual member has a vacation and can't make it, then
Yeah,
Now we can remote in, which
Yeah,
just
right.
makes it a little easier.
yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to just keep the regular 2-week thing and then
Second Tuesday and fourth Tuesday.
second and fourth Tuesdays of July and August, and then we can identify a potential date for a retreat, quote unquote, goal setting session. That would be
Right.
the only agenda item. I don't, is there a particular, is it better to do that early or
Yeah. If
in
we,
July?
I think it's good to do it earlier only because then it helps inform, what we're doing, particularly if we're going to try to prioritize kind of key things that are the most important for us to be working on.
I'm traveling the week of the 14th.
Are we talking about July?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's the week of the 7th, the week of the 21st.
I'm away the week of the 21st. I could send a
Seven,
remote into the meeting of,
the 7th is the week after Independence Day.
Yeah.
Monday's probably might be is Monday a holiday here?
no, but it is.
oh,
And
Friday's the 4th.
I will not be in town on the 8th.
So is the holiday Thursday or Monday?
Sounds like that's
Probably,
Holiday's the 4th.
yeah, it's a
Oh, yeah, you
Friday,
get the
right?
4th.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it doesn't need to be a Tuesday. We can just
Well,
do this anywhere.
I could do later in the week.
So what are you
The
talking about?
9th,
9th,
or
10th?
11th? Well, not the 11th. 9th would work better for
Yeah,
me.
I don't care. I'm fine with it.
I can do the 9th.
So what?
Christine,
our
how's
meeting
the
is-
9th?
Are we gonna have this?
That works.
There are meeting dates in July,
Well, we'd be meeting on the 8th,
the 8th, the 5th, and the 22nd.
8th, the 22nd, and then potentially the goal setting on the 9th.
And it's still in July here, yeah?
We're still on
Yeah.
July.
Okay.
Wednesday, the 9th, does that work? Or-
Yep. I think that,
We're doing an evening, we're doing a daytime.
how much time have you allotted for that in the past? Was it a few
I think
hours?
we ended up doing 2 rounds on
We
it,
did.
didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
We can schedule one now.
You did the work, and then at the next meeting, you did a half hour to approve it
Yeah,
at a regularly scheduled meeting.
At a regularly scheduled.
yeah.
So we could do that theoretically on the 22nd or the first meeting in August. So why don't we just schedule something for that day? Are evenings better? Or, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me that,
Well, the working folks, what do you think?
I generally would think, for me, an evening would be better.
Uh-huh.
But doesn't have to be at 7, it could be
No.
at,
Right, we could
Do
make
it
it,
6
could make it early.
5 and,
5,
We could have some dinner. with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
We've done
usually
that
that's
in
what
the
we do.
past.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. to
Okay.
do, yeah.
What do you, 5, 6? What works? for
say
you?
5:00.
That is good.
Which day is that?
The
9th.
the 9th.
9th.
And what order would you anticipate, Scott, or?
Pizza.
No.
I'd like lasagna, please.
I think we'd want to review, like quickly recap on last year's goals.
Mhm.
Look at kind of what we did, what we didn't do. Are we moving any of the things we didn't do, kicking it again, and then do the goal setting. I don't know. The question I have this year is how much of the goal setting is with the fall town meeting. We're probably going to have some goals that are focused on that November timeframe, and then some longer term goals. And we might have some new goals coming out of November for May. So I don't know how that might impact our goal setting, but we can figure that out.
And the other thing we did, which I thought was useful, was we sent out, we each looked at the goals from last year and wrote some notes. And I can't remember if we submitted them
Send
or
them to the
we.
chair, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you had drafted a draft goal list that we then, remember, we kept moving everything to like
Right.
other.
No, but as the
Yeah.
chair, I think I said, here's what I would propose as goals. I sent those
Yeah.
out and I said, why don't you prepare, feedback, and if there are ones you want to add or not.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah, we
that
can do
worked
that.
out well as you take the lead,
Yep.
figure out what you think are important, and we'll all chime in.
No, I thought it worked well last year. I'll go back and look at what that process was, and we can,
And are you thinking 3 hours?
yeah,
Okay. All right.
5 to 8. on the 9th.
5 to 8 on the 9th.
And then we'll stick to the 8th, the 22nd, and then in August would be how does this work? Oh, the 12th and 26th.
Yeah.
Ryan, do you send out meeting notices for our calendar?
We're starting to.
Yeah, thank
12th
you.
and the 26th. Yeah,
It's not on the calendar. It's not real.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm doing something.
I might have to join one of those. I might have to do remotely.
It's the 9th
9th.
of July at 5
So it's
o'clock,
right after the 8th.
right after the 8th.
Yeah, we'll have
Next day.
meeting we'll have
So
the
read those dates off
usual-
again, Scott.
Is that
Read those dates off. So it's the 8th and the, what was it?
8th? So our regularly scheduled meeting is the 8th. We'll have the special meeting on the 9th.
Right.
And then we'll have the the next meeting will be on July 22nd, which is the 4th Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a meeting on the second Tuesday of August, which is the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 4th Tuesday of August, which is the 26th.
Got it.
And those will be regularly scheduled.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And if we need something, a follow-up after our goal setting, we can figure that out.
Great. Thank you.
And I'm assuming if one wants to just mark in their calendar the second, fourth Tuesdays going through.
Generally.
Yeah.
Fall.
I mean, I think
Do that so you know, right, if you're planning anything further.
generally, yeah. I mean, I don't see any reason to change that. It's all.
And sometimes there's a holiday or something comes up, or we move it, but
The special meetings, right?
yeah. That makes sense to me.
Good. Got it. All right. Next,
TA report.
roll it.
All right.
Only 5 minutes.
6 minutes.
Following is my town administrator report for June 10th, 2025. So meet the new select board member begins tomorrow. Christine Stevens is coming to town hall. It's an opportunity for staff to introduce themselves, highlight their roles, and share their initiatives with you. So thanks for agreeing to that. The new chair may be joining.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Looking for new venues for town administrator coffee hours. I don't want to stop that initiative, but I was relying pretty heavily on Ferns. So looking for places. The Clark Farm stand is going to be my first target. But if you can think of any other places where people might want to talk to me about things, that'd be
Transfer station, come on, Ryan,
maybe.
Saturday morning. Or the 3 to 5 Saturday afternoon, the latecomers.
Yeah. Well, between the Sunday town meetings, talking about maybe another weekend and the transfer station, I'm probably not going to be married, so that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Some human resource updates from Aubrey Thomas. We received 16 well-qualified candidates for the conservation administrator position, and you heard tonight that 4 of those will be interviewed in the final round. Aubrey's put together a nice group to vet that important position, and we hope to have an offer in place by the end of next week or the following week, and someone in place by July 1, which would be important. We're still trying to recruit a DPW mechanic position, but have not had any applications. So we're going to have to think that position through. We concluded our succession planning grant. This was a $30,000 grant we got from the state. We engaged with UMass Collins Center to come up with a succession plan that we'll be presenting to you. They also did leadership development with our department heads and mid-level employees, which was great. And then our department heads engaged in a 2-part succession planning exercise where they're going to bring their thoughts on succession in their particular departments that I'm going to accumulate with Aubrey into one report to present you as well. So you get a big succession planning exercise in front of you sometime in the early fall, so you can think about how to provide leadership for the town on that. Speaking of the fall town meeting schedule is now upon us, which sounds ridiculous since we just completed the annual town meeting. I'm going to ask you next meeting to open the fall town meeting warrant so we can start collecting warrant articles for a closure of September 9th. You need to finalize and sign this warrant by September 23rd. There's a lot to bylaw changes, various hearings and other things. So although there's going to be a lot less, they're going to be pretty detailed and cumbersome investigations. I would ask the board to start thinking about what information you're going to need and what liaison work you're going to have to do in order to think of these bylaws through. I'm thinking in particular the demo delay bylaw, the wetlands bylaw, which we're hoping to bring in front of you next meeting, and the MBTA communities work. So those are 3 big things that are going to have a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Looking to see if you tentatively approve this schedule, assuming I don't get any flat no's, we can make minor tweaks to it, but this is what we're going to publish to people.
And November 2 is a Sunday, so we're going with another Sunday. Okay.
Okay, the budget updates, the finance committee is going to be joining you at your next meeting to talk about end of year transfers. There are some ones that we need to explain, but overall not too many to consider. I am very pleased to report that we received a Shared Streets Award. We received notification this week of a $99.5 thousand grant from the state to help with the implementation of our Church Street Safety Improvement Project. So this is sidewalks down Church Street. If we're successful with the Safety Committee's Complete Streets grant, it would be full sidewalk from the school all the way to essentially Kimball's. So it's a nice project. You'll see later that we're going to ask for the design funding for this, assuming that we get both. If not, then we will. This is a 3-year grant, so we'll look to see if there's a possibility of reapplying for that Complete Streets grant, or if we're going to do this as an individual project. The improvements include the installation of ADA compliant ramps on the school driveways, crosswalks, and various things to connect all of the things. So you have the library, you have some senior housing there, you have the school, you have the cemetery, you have Kimball's. So this project really connects everything, and is part of a long shared desire to have these complete streets projects all connect.
Yeah.
I was very honored to participate in Memorial Day, and many of you were there as well. So Scott Evans and the Celebrations Committee once again surpassed their expectations with their dedication. I was proud to march with my family and hear an inspiring guest speaker in Brian Wigton, our Air Force veteran. I didn't hold the Air Forceness against him. He was very inspiring anyways. The parade followed its traditional route, beginning with a tribute at recently interred veterans at Green Cemetery, continuing to the Civil War Monument, the Veterans Honor Roll, which I was honored to participate in, and the Minuteman Monument. So special thanks to our veterans, volunteers, the Carlisle Scouting community, and the public school band, who was excellent, for their contributions to making the event memorable. I did reward my kids with Kimball's as well, so it was a nice day. The 2025 supplemental road maintenance budget. If you remember, we approved a budget last year and then said if town meeting approved more funding, we would look at some supplement. So Jim and I worked together to propose the following. This is in addition to the work that is ongoing and will complete tomorrow on Baldwin, Pattern, Rogers, Stearns, West, and Woodridge. So you'll look at the report and you'll see we have an estimated revenue of about 1.1 million. This comes from our currently uncommitted Chapter 90 or our Chapter 90 reserve, fair share funding from the state, the proposed Chapter 90 for next year, and the town meeting vote of 375,000. So 1.1 million. We are proposing the following. We already did with our engineers some procurement assistance to make sure that all of our scopes of work were compliant and good for procurement. That was 4,000. Newport has put in change orders of 61 and 18,000. This allowed us to complete all of West Street for a very cheap price, which we took advantage of. And then when they do these projects, they uncover, when they mill, the need to shim is the actual word. So you put in pavement in problem areas so that the base becomes more secure, and then they pave over the top, which it should last longer. But that did result in an $18,000 change, which is not uncommon. Next, we'd be looking at 135,000 for complete streets design. This would be the shared street and a complete streets project, designing it through construction, bid documents, and everything from our designers in order to implement those sidewalks. You're becoming familiar with design costs, so that is what that would be. For the Westward Street culvert, we did put in the temporary culvert, and now we have to study that area to make sure that the culvert is good enough to be permanent, or if it needs a replacement. This is required by the Conservation Commission. We can't get around this requirement. As soon as we have a new administrator, they're going to want to do this. And of course, Sylvia's not going to let us forget either. So this cost of 133,000 would be to conduct that hydrology study.
Wow.
The school facilities parking lot was pulled from the capital plan and added to the Chapter 90 plan. This would allow us to pave that parking lot, or it should come in under 30 grand, but we're estimating 30.
When you say the school facilities, is that the one around behind the gym? Yeah, okay. In the back, yeah, sort of between the gym and the backside of the middle school.
It's a very small area for where the facilities Oaks Park.
Yeah,
And they pull all their materials out of there, it becomes a muddy mess and
yeah,
a nightmare.
right.
We're
I've
gonna pave
seen,
it.
I've seen that, yeah.
Then we have three projects from your discussions last year. So first, a lot of work went into Pheasant Hill. We've already done the engineering and design in order to solve the drainage problem that the resident came and spoke to you about, significant drainage problem. We have a fix. If this is approved, we'll put it out to bid and then we'll do the entire top coat on Pheasant Hill, which was never done. So we didn't do the top coat because we wanted to improve the drainage and other issues first. That's all been put into this bid. We believe to do all of it, it will be 164,000. That's our estimate. Then Berry Corner Road and Berry Corner Lane, there is a mistake in this total. So Berry Corner Lane, they estimated the entire Berry Corner Lane, which includes mostly someone's driveway, and they shrunk it down to just the piece that is 20 grand, not or 200 grand. So the total for that project would be 200,000, or reduce this by 260,000.
I mean, the two Berry Corner items.
So the total is what? Is it this 500,000?
No. So the total will be around 800 and
No,
750.
two Berry
The
Corner.
Berry Corner, you have 1.7 and 284.
It would be 170 plus 20,000. That 284 is the mistake.
Two,
Okay.
so 190 or 195.
$160,000
Yeah, really.
So 740,000 in total spending. As you know, as we discussed, we have 1.1 in revenue and reserves, which would leave a reserve of 400,000. We're also going to bid the three projects, the two, Berry Corner Road and Berry Corner Lane, as alternates in case these bids don't come in right. And we need to cut projects. That'll be the one that we cut.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Assuming there's no issues there, we will go ahead and bid that out and we'll bring it to you when that comes in. My report explains all of what I just talked about. Professional development. I completed the very fun and tedious MCPPO redesignation. So that's done. Now we have 4 certified officials, including Aubrey, who just completed her renewal. If you include Andy, Aubrey, Gretchen, and myself, we have 4 MCPPO trained folks here in town, which is good for procurement. And then I completed the knowledge assessment and applied for the ICMA's credential manager program, which was one of my goals this year. We'll see what they think of me and whether or not I get that. The Korean War Ambassador for Peace Medal. On May 17th, our veteran director, Karen Tyler, joined with Susan Evans from the celebrations committee to honor a Korean War veteran from Carlisle. The consul general from Korea came and from the consulate in Boston and presented this medal to the recipients. So it was a pretty meaningful event. I wasn't able to go. Unfortunately, I had drill, which is kind of related, I guess. And Susan said it was amazing. She was so happy to go and see Edward Andrews, our 93-year-old Army veteran who was there, and one of the recipients. The other recipients is no longer with us, so the daughter accepted on behalf of the family, which was great. I think Karen deserves some credit for organizing some Carlisle participation in this and making sure that we're honoring our local veterans. I'll move quickly through our capital project updates. The comprehensive culvert analysis, which has been delayed since March because of town meeting, has been delayed again, but will be presented to you in July. So you're going to hear all about culverts in July. We bid our elevator modernization project. Unfortunately, we are currently experiencing a bid protest, which is common. The bid protest centers around, it was from the highest bidder. We had 4 bidders. We feel good about the bid. Town council feels good about the bid, but we have to go through this process. So we've started the contract process. The IG will decide whether or not our bid was bad. If it was bad, or that needs to be, the consequence will be that it'll be rebid.
And how long does it take for that determination generally?
We've asked for a rush because we think it's just because they didn't win the bid.
Yeah.
So 2 to 3 weeks. Again, worst case, we put it back out to bid and we feel confident the bids will come back where we thought they were, if not lower this time. So it might actually help us. Brick building HVAC will be discussed by the MFC. We want to put this project out to bid. It is a joint project between the MFC and the RecCom. And then our town hall bathrooms renovation at the direction of the MFC, we rescinded our contract with Southern Maine Construction. Although they were qualified in the low bidder, they didn't have the proper CSL license that was necessary from our building inspector. So we plan to rebid this project this month. For construction projects, the library renovation project continues. I am recommending that the board assign a liaison to my left here to the library building committee, since she's already on it and is the chair, but we want to ensure timely communication with the project. In particular, they're working through the design right now and making sure that the design estimates match the current funding. And there's going to be obviously a funding discussion that comes with that, and especially when we start bidding the project. So I highly recommend the select board understands where that building project is because of its significance.
Christine can't be here only at liaison. You can be.
That's what I was saying. He's hinting that we already have one.
Great. Hey, perfect.
With the police station renovation passed pretty overwhelmingly at the ballot box, which allows us to start contracting, which we've done this week. We could have that golden shovel in the ground by the end of the month. Given all the projects that we're proposing, we're gonna get one of those golden shovels, a cheap one, for the pictures. We're working with Tecton and CMS to finalize the contracts to support your continued design work this summer, and understand the people that are working with the, what are you calling yourselves? The
Fire Apparatus Assessment Committee.
Fire Apparatus Assessment Committee. Continues Carlisle's tradition of horrible committee names.
Apparatus Assessment.
And next meeting, you'll finally get your discussion about the DPW building with the MFC.
Sounds like a Bostonian
It's a
sign.
little bit like.
I have approved a slew of Rotary signs that is in this report for you to review. If you have any questions, please let me know. We believe they were all within the parameters of what we were allowed, and I'd like to finish my report with some staff recognition. So I'd like to thank our staff is very committed to going to town meeting and being involved in town meeting, and a lot of this is the work they do that summarizes their dedication to the year. But I just like to thank our employees for their dedication during the town meeting process this year. Many of them were in attendance. They're not residents. They're just there to provide information if necessary, to support and to, really understand where their projects are going. And we are now very all focused on fall town meeting, which is coming up quickly, if you haven't noticed in my cadence of this. I'd also like to recognize Ashley, Alana, and our dedicated election staff for an outstanding annual town election that saw more than 1,100 voters participating, which is a very strong turnout for a small town like Carlisle. Big towns around us don't get that type of turnout, and it was Ashley's first election. So welcome to Carlisle. You can tell it's a well-run event when everything seems seamless, and you picture that Ashley's been here for years, not months. So I just want to comment on Ashley's professionalism and how seamlessly she's fit in with our staff. I'd like to thank Debbie Bentley and her volunteers for the annual poppy display on the town common. As a veteran and the town administrator, I appreciate displays like this that remind us of sacrifices made during World War I. I was able to bring my children up there and explain the significance, and then sent a letter to my town saying, why aren't we doing more things like this? I'd also like to recognize Sarah Wasserman for her outstanding work at Foss Farm and championing our Town Hall Garden initiative. So our Town Hall Garden is planted. She also took over the Foss Farm duties and is working with your garden manager in order to make sure that that's seamless. Sarah does an exceptional job, dedicates a lot of time to our Town Hall Garden, which helps with morale here, gives us something to do, and connects us to the community. So I appreciate Sarah. And lastly, I'd like to commend Aubrey Thomas for stepping in as the interim COHS director for months before the position was permanently filled.
Yeah.
So she managed a tremendous workload, her daily work, preparing for the transition, her responsibilities as the human resource director, all of that continued. And she's also the town's communications director. So all that communication, everything about town meeting was done while she was being the interim director.
Yeah, she did.
So this is her dedication to the town. I did send her home because of that dedication. I wish she was here to hear the nice words, but she exemplifies the resilience of our town staff and is a good model for everyone else. You've talked about the upcoming dates of interest. I will let the board know, I did let you know in an email that I will be gone the first 2 weeks in August for annual training. So far in my tenure here, I have had what's called year-round annual training, which is a day here and a day there, which is why it seems like every once in a while I'm on military duty. I'm going back to the traditional 2 weeks gone. So during that time, I will be out of contact for those 2 weeks of my military service and appointing an interim. Just giving you some heads up that I just found out about it, and it's in August. And again, my wife is thrilled. And lastly, I attached an agenda for you to review for next meeting, and that is my report.
I noted on the agenda, it said something about the diabetes ride. Was there something we needed to do on that?
So that's on the agenda. We thought we might be able to fit it in. I do have the approvals from the chiefs, but I will incorporate it in my next report.
Okay,
So it's not till August, so we have time.
okay.
Okay. Next up, we have warrant and minutes approval. There were 2 minutes included in the packet from May 6th and May 21st.
They looked okay to me. I went over them.
I have one small typo in the first one.
Okay.
In the second reference to Neil Joyce, his first name is misspelled. Other than that, they look great.
Second reference to Neil Joyce.
Well, it's in the, I'm getting to it now, so it's. So he's correctly spelled in his attendance, and then the very first paragraph, which is, not the first paragraph, the paragraph of a police station renovation, it's Neil.
Yeah.
And then I have to note that I've been reading minutes for many, many years, and it's the first time, and it was twice, that I guess it was Gretchen said, Clerk Scott Triola did X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen
It's
that.
gotta be AI, right?
It is AI.
Oh, yeah, right.
So that's
Right.
clerk, former
Okay,
clerk.
so we have, do we have that edit? Like, does someone have that edit?
Should have listened.
Yeah, we can just do it. We can say
Yeah, as amended.
as amended.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So can I get a
So
motion on
I
the
move to approve, both minutes, isn't it?
May 6th and
May 20?
May, what was the other one?
I lost it.
That was the special,
21st.
yeah,
Good. Is there a second?
second.
Discussion? Vote? All in favor? Great.
We had one abstention, it looked like.
What's that?
Christine.
Just.
I was not.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Thank you. Liaison reports. I can just say briefly, the fire apparatus assessment committee. As we've met 3 times, we're meeting weekly. First meeting was a kickoff. Second meeting was a tour of the fire station, which is very helpful. I also attended they had training over at the school. So you get to see all the apparatus in action. It's really interesting to see the coordination, but there'll be more on that. We're moving as fast as we can to get some more information. We may be bringing in MRI to do a little bit of external advisory for us, and more to come.
Good.
Great. Any other liaison reports? Anything from Conscom or?
We're gonna give a.
Heard that. We got that one. All right. So finally, community input. Anybody out there? Thank you very much for staying to the end.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome.
There's no surprise. We're just
Yeah.
finishing.
And
Kate was.
thank you, Scott.
Okay,
Nothing.
all right.
There we go.
Yep,
We're off.
good start.
New year.
We're on for
Start.
So can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So
All in
moved.
favor?
Aye.
Move your feet. Thank you.
Get to have this.